My name is Elena and I am 34 years old. I had just discovered that my own family secretly charged $14,700 on my credit card for my sister's luxury trip while living rent-free in my house. The moment I saw the receipt, my lungs tightened as if I was drowning. They laughed when I confronted them. They called me dramatic. They said I owed them. But something inside me clicked, like a locked door finally opening. They had no idea what that house really meant, or what I was capable of doing next. The night I signed the sale papers, I watched the porch lights go dark. Before I continue, tell me your country and the time right now. I can still hear the echo of my sister's laughter filling every room of our childhood home, like she owned the air itself. I used to watch from the hallway, clutching my school books, waiting for someone to notice I was there. They never did. She was bright and reckless, the center of every conversation, and I was a shadow slipping along the walls. Our parents spoiled her with gifts, compliments, attention. Birthdays were full productions, balloons tied to chairs, sparkling cakes, cameras clicking. Mine were quiet dinners with discount candles. When she failed a test, they blamed me for stressing her. When she broke a vase, they swore I pushed her. Once, I scraped my knee on gravel, came home bleeding, and my mother barely looked up from blow-drying my sister's hair. I remember thinking the blood might matter if it was hers. That thought terrified me. I was the child who never asked for anything. I mowed lawns to pay for second-hand shoes while my sister received brand new ones in pretty pink boxes. Every compliment she got felt like an arrow through my ribs. She's so talented. She's so beautiful. She could have whatever she wants. My name was always second, if mentioned at all. As we grew older, the gap only widened. At 17, I worked 2 jobs just to save for college, while my sister floated through parties and weekend trips, her mistakes paid for without consequence. I didn't resent her. I resented the hierarchy that kept her on top and me invisible. I learned to survive by being small. When I bought my own car, used but reliable, my father shrugged and said, "Well, she needs something better. Give her yours." He wasn't joking. I watched my sister run her hand over the dented hood and wrinkle her nose. She left to meet her friends and took the family car instead, leaving me with bus schedules and rain-soaked mornings. There were moments when I thought maybe love would even things out. Maybe time would fix it. But the damage was already inside me, woven into my sense of self. I believed their behavior was normal. Toxicity feels like truth when it's all you know. I remember one winter night, my sister crying hysterically because her boyfriend didn't text back. She wailed loud enough for the neighbors to hear. My parents rushed to her side, wrapping her in blankets, feeding her hot chocolate, whispering comfort. I sat at the dining table, staring at my unfinished homework, forgotten. I could have been on fire and they would have used me for warmth. When I finally left home at 23, I felt like I was escaping captivity. I worked every hour I could, hoarding pennies, refusing help. Independence was my oxygen. My dream was simple, a small place of my own, somewhere quiet, where no one could throw me out of a room with a sigh. Years later, I bought the house. I thought I was done with the past. But family has a way of slipping through locked doors, especially when they smell comfort. My sister called one afternoon, sobbing that her marriage was falling apart. Her husband had cheated. She had nowhere to go. My parents chimed in, "You have extra space. Be generous." The words stung. They always did. Be generous. As though I owed them kindness as repayment for a debt I never agreed to. But I said yes. Of course I did. She moved in with her designer bags, boxes of shoes, framed photos from a honeymoon that had barely ended. She stood in the middle of my living room and declared it was cute but small. I smiled and made her tea. Then my parents arrived with luggage. Just for a week, they said. A week turned into a month. Then months. They filled the closets. They rearranged my furniture. They criticized my taste, my habits, my life. I watched the house change shape around them. My sister sprawled across the sofa, scrolling through her phone, ordering expensive skincare using my Wi-Fi. My mother cooked and never cleaned. My father parked his car in my driveway as though it had always belonged there. And then something began to fracture inside me. One evening, I walked through the hallway and heard them talking about me. They didn't know I was home. "She's lucky we're here," my mother said. "She'd be miserable alone," my sister replied. "She should be grateful," my father added. Grateful. For hosting them. Feeding them. Supporting them. I stood in the dark hallway, feeling unseen in my own house. My sister's laughter floated through the kitchen. She opened the fridge and said, "God, she buys cheap groceries." Then she took money from my wallet to order delivery. They all sat around the table, eating, drinking wine, toasting to themselves. I stared from the doorway, invisible again. All the old shadows came back, the hierarchy, the favoritism, the feeling that I was an intruder in my own life. I wanted to scream. I wanted to disappear. But I didn't either. I stayed polite. I swallowed shame like medicine. And then one morning, the bank app glowed on my phone, showing a transaction I didn't recognize. My stomach turned cold as I opened it. $14,700. A travel agency. 4 plane tickets. 5-star resort. My sister's name. My hands trembled. I scrolled. Another charge. Another. Spa treatments. Designer shopping. My credit card. No permission. No apology. My heart beat like a trapped animal. When I called her, she laughed. "You can afford it. Relax." The sentence cracked something in me that had been waiting my whole life. It wasn't the money. It was the truth behind it. To them, I was not family. I was a resource. A servant. A bank. I hung up the phone without a word. And that night, while they slept under my roof, I logged into my account and found something else, hidden deep among the charges, something that made my blood run to ice. A document I didn't recognize. A transfer I didn't authorize. A line I had never crossed. It wasn't just theft. It was betrayal woven into numbers. I stared at the screen, unable to breathe. And in that exact moment, I knew. My silence was over. I used to believe a deed meant ownership. That once your name was printed in ink, the place was yours. But the truth is, ownership means nothing when you live with people who treat your kindness as permission. The house I bought with quiet pride had become their kingdom. Every morning, I woke to the sound of my sister's laughter echoing down the hall, the same laughter that once filled our childhood home. She paraded around in silk robes, using my bathroom, my perfume, my time. My parents drank coffee at my table, reading newspapers I paid for, acting as though the walls themselves bowed to them. At first, I told myself it was temporary. That they were hurt, that families support each other. That this chaos would pass. But weeks blurred into months, and I stopped recognizing my own life. My house, the one I built brick by brick through exhaustion and sacrifice, became a museum of their entitlement. My mother took my bedroom because her back needed a softer mattress. My father turned my small office into a den for his endless television marathons. My sister transformed the guest room into a boutique closet. I started sleeping on the couch, the same couch she'd spilled red wine on the week before. When friends asked how I was, I lied. I told them I was fine. I said family was everything. I didn't want to admit that every day I woke up as a stranger in the home I paid for. It was the little things that broke me. My favorite mug disappearing. The sound of their laughter when I walked in. The way they said your house with air quotes. They would host dinner parties without telling me, guests I didn't know sitting at my table, drinking from my glasses, leaving stains on my walls. I'd come home from long shifts to find strangers in my kitchen, my groceries gone, my boundaries erased. When I tried to speak, my father said, "Don't make a scene. It's just family." That sentence was a cage. I noticed the bills piling up, utilities, repairs, food. My sister's friends stayed over constantly, treating the house like a hotel. When I asked for help with expenses, my mother laughed and said, "We're family, not tenants." That's when I realized they didn't see it as my home at all. They believed they had rescued me from loneliness. They saw my independence as something to control, not celebrate. Then came the locks. One afternoon, I came home from work early. The key wouldn't turn. I tried again, thinking I'd made a mistake, but it was deliberate. They'd changed the locks. My house. My name on the deed. My key, useless. I rang the doorbell. My sister opened it, smirking, her phone in hand. "Oh, sorry," she said sweetly. "We needed more privacy." Privacy. In my home. My mother appeared behind her, arms folded. "We thought it was best," she said. "You're always working. You hardly use the rooms anyway." I stood there on the porch, in my own clothes, holding groceries that suddenly felt absurd, like props from someone else's life. They looked at me like I was the intruder. I laughed, but it came out broken. I could feel neighbors' eyes on me through curtains. My father's voice drifted from the living room, "If she doesn't like it, she can leave." And that's exactly what I did. I walked away. Not because I was weak. Because I knew if I stayed, I'd become something unrecognizable. That night, I slept in my car outside the house I owned. I could see the windows glowing with warm light, their silhouettes moving inside like a perfect picture of domestic bliss. I turned off my phone and stared at the dark sky. I wanted to believe I'd wake up and it would all make sense again. But the next morning, reality was colder than the car seat beneath me. I showered at the gym, went to work, smiled through exhaustion. The routine numbed me, but the humiliation lingered. I didn't tell anyone what had happened. It was easier to pretend. Days later, I returned to the house to collect some documents. My sister opened the door wearing a silk robe, mine, and waved me inside as if granting permission. The air smelled like perfume and entitlement. My mother was rearranging the furniture again. My father was asleep on the couch. They didn't look up. Didn't ask where I'd been. Didn't notice that I hesitated before stepping onto the rug I'd chosen with so much care. That's when I realized they didn't see me at all. I was a convenience, a resource, a silent background character in their perfect little story. That night, I sat in my car again and opened my banking app to check the damage. I expected to see groceries, bills, the usual. But the numbers didn't make sense. The luxury charges were only the beginning. As I scrolled deeper through the transactions, I saw transfers to unfamiliar accounts, auto payments I'd never set up, names I didn't recognize. And then, a credit application I hadn't submitted. Someone had used my identity. The betrayal didn't feel like a stab. It felt like drowning slowly, knowing the water was poured by the people you love. I called my sister, my voice shaking. She answered on speakerphone, laughing with friends. I told her about the fraud. She said, "You're so paranoid. Maybe if you weren't so uptight, people would like you more." The call ended with laughter, not mine. I stared at my reflection in the car window, realizing that my house was nothing more than a cage dressed as security. It wasn't mine anymore, at least, not emotionally. Every wall, every picture frame, every chair had been claimed by someone else's comfort. I drove away, my heart numb, promising myself I wouldn't cry. But when I reached the edge of town, I pulled over and did just that, a decade's worth of silence breaking loose all at once. I screamed into the steering wheel until my throat burned, until the pain turned into something colder. Something sharper. Something like resolve. Because in that moment, one truth became crystal clear. If they could turn my home into theirs, I could turn their comfort into a lesson. And I was done being the quiet one. The next morning, my phone buzzed, another bank alert. The amount made my skin crawl. $14,700. My sister's name glowed on the screen. The moment the notification appeared on my screen, I felt it, that quiet drop in my stomach, the premonition of betrayal that always seems to find me. $14,700. Luxury International Travel Agency. At first, I thought it was a scam. My breath came out in small, shaky bursts as I opened the transaction details. My name. My card number. The timestamp, 2:14 a.m. I was asleep then, exhausted from a double shift, while someone else used my silence to buy paradise. I scrolled down, and there it was. Passenger, Amelia R., my sister. Along with 3 others. Destination, Maldives. First-class tickets. Spa packages. 5-star resort. My mind went blank. The room spun. The faint hum of the refrigerator became a roar in my ears. For a long moment, I couldn't even move. Then anger rose, not as fire, but as something colder. Something steadier. I called her. She answered on the second ring, her voice light, carefree. Hey, you awake? It's late. Did you just book a trip using my card? She laughed, a sound that could slice glass. Oh, come on. You're overreacting. $14,000, Amelia. It's just a card, Lena. You make enough. Don't ruin the vibe. I could hear waves crashing behind her voice. She was already there. Already gone. Where are you? I whispered. The beach. Don't worry, I'll pay you back when I can. Then she hung up. I sat there staring at the call log, the seconds blinking like a countdown to something I hadn't prepared for. My phone buzzed again, a text from my mother. Elena, don't make this a big deal. Your sister needs this trip. She's been through a lot. I stared at the message until my vision blurred. Through a lot. She had cheated, lied, moved into my home, changed my locks, and somehow, she was the victim again. I called my father next. He sighed before I spoke. You always turn things dramatic. Family helps each other. By stealing? Watch your tone, he snapped. She's your sister. You're lucky you can afford it. That word again. Lucky. As if my entire life was charity they could claim. I ended the call, my hand trembling so hard I dropped the phone. It hit the floor with a sound that felt final. I picked it up, opened my banking app again, and scrolled further. More charges, luxury boutiques, fine dining, transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. My body went numb. It wasn't just a charge. It was a message. They were telling me I existed to serve them. I pressed my palms against the table, breathing through the shaking. For the first time in years, the anger didn't turn inward. It didn't become guilt. It sharpened into something clear. Something that sounded a lot like power. I grabbed my laptop. I needed proof. I downloaded every statement, every receipt, every bank notification. I printed screenshots until my hands were covered in toner dust. The printer hummed like a heartbeat, page after page of betrayal laid out in black and white. That's when I noticed it, a strange document attached to one of the email confirmations. An authorization form. Forged signature. My name, written in looping cursive that wasn't mine. My chest went cold. They had faked my approval. I sat there, staring at the evidence. $14,000 was just the surface. Beneath it was years of entitlement, manipulation, and control. My generosity had been weaponized. I called the bank, reported the fraud, and froze the account. The representative said she'd initiate an investigation. Her voice was polite, rehearsed, distant. She didn't know this wasn't just about money, it was about blood. When I hung up, the house was silent. Too silent. I could hear the refrigerator clicking, the distant hum of the street outside, the sound of my own pulse. My sister's perfume still lingered in the hallway, floral, expensive, suffocating. That night, I couldn't sleep. I wandered through the dark rooms, tracing my fingers along the furniture they'd claimed, the pictures they'd rehung, the spaces they'd turned into monuments of their comfort. It was all mine, legally. But emotionally, it belonged to them. Until now. Something inside me shifted. I realized that the only way to take my life back wasn't through begging or confrontation. It was through silence and precision, the kind of silence they'd always mistaken for weakness. I started organizing files, bank statements, texts, voicemails, screenshots of the forged signature. I labeled folders by month, by transaction, by name. Each piece of evidence was a weapon waiting to be used. The next morning, I drove downtown. The sky was overcast, heavy with stormlight. I parked outside a glass building with a brass plaque, Law Offices of Graham and Pierce. My reflection in the glass door looked unfamiliar, tired, but focused. I walked inside. The receptionist looked up, smiled politely, and asked if I had an appointment. No, I said. But I need to speak to someone about financial fraud. Family related. She hesitated, then disappeared into the back. A moment later, a man in a gray suit appeared, tall, calm, eyes sharp with practiced empathy. I'm David Pierce, he said. Why don't you come in? I followed him into a quiet office filled with framed diplomas and soft light. He motioned for me to sit. I placed my folder on the table between us. Everything's in here, I said, my voice steady but low. They used my credit card. Forged my signature. And they're living in my house. He opened the folder, scanned a few pages, then looked up. Your house? Yes, I said. But they changed the locks. He leaned back, studying me. That's not just fraud, he said quietly. That's criminal. The word hung in the air. Criminal. For years, I had been the quiet daughter, the accommodating sister, the easy target. Now, I was the one holding proof, cold, undeniable, powerful. David's eyes softened slightly. Tell me everything, from the beginning. And I did. When I finished, he nodded slowly and said, we can build a case. You have rights, more than you realize. I sat there, staring at the papers, feeling something new bloom in my chest. Not rage. Not grief. Something calmer. Stronger. Justice. Outside, the sky broke open with rain. It drummed against the windows like applause. As I gathered my papers to leave, David said quietly, Elena, there's something about property law you should know. He slid a folder toward me, stamped with my grandmother's name. The day I tried to talk to them, the air itself felt wrong, heavy, like the moment before a thunderstorm. I had practiced my words in the car, whispering them like prayers. I didn't want to fight. I just wanted acknowledgement, maybe a sliver of respect. When I stepped through the door, my sister was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, sunlight pooling around her like she owned it. My mother was in the kitchen, humming. My father muted the TV when he saw me, his expression already sour. We need to talk, I said. My voice was steady, too steady. My mother sighed, setting down her mug. If this is about the trip again? It's not just about the trip, I said, louder this time. It's about the house. The money. The lies. Amelia smirked. Oh my God, you're still on that? She didn't even look up. You're so dramatic, Lena. I felt heat rising to my cheeks. You forged my signature. My father scoffed. We didn't forge anything. You always overreact. I pulled the printed papers from my folder, laid them out on the table, the authorization form, the credit charges, the statement from the bank. Then explain this, I said. For a second, silence filled the room. Then laughter. My sister laughed so hard she snorted. My mother smiled like it was all amusing. You actually went to the bank? My father asked, shaking his head. Do you realize how paranoid you sound? I wanted to scream. Instead, I stood there, trembling, holding the evidence like it meant something. Like truth mattered. Do you have any idea what you've done to me? I said. You've stolen from me, humiliated me, and I'm the one you're mocking? My mother rolled her eyes. You're embarrassing yourself. Amelia picked up her phone and started recording. Say it again, she said, smirking. Tell the camera how your family ruined your life. Maybe you'll get sympathy online. I stared at the glowing red record light. The humiliation was electric, crawling under my skin. I reached out, trying to grab her phone, but she pulled back, laughing. My father stood up. Enough. I'm not leaving, I said. This is my house. His face twisted. It's our home too. We've lived here for months. You can't just throw us out. Yes, I whispered. I can. That's when my mother's voice snapped, sharp and cold. You ungrateful child. After everything we've done for you. My knees weakened. Everything they had done for me? The irony was so cruel I almost laughed. Instead, tears filled my eyes. I just want my life back, I said softly. Amelia pointed her camera at my face. Cry a little harder, she said. Maybe then people will believe you. The sound of her voice broke something in me. I turned toward the door, heart pounding so loudly it drowned out their laughter. As I reached for the handle, I heard my father mutter, "She'll come crawling back. She always does." I walked out without looking back. The door slammed behind me, rattling the frame. The sound echoed down the street, final and hollow. Outside, the cold air hit me like punishment. My eyes blurred with tears as I stumbled to the car. My reflection in the window looked like a ghost, pale, trembling, hollow-eyed. I sat there for a long time, gripping the steering wheel, trying to breathe. I thought about the years of quiet endurance, of bending until I nearly broke, and realized this was it. There was nothing left to salvage. But even then, some small, dying part of me hoped they'd follow. That someone would open the door, call my name, apologize. They didn't. Through the window, I saw Amelia holding her phone up to the light, checking the video. My parents stood behind her, talking casually as if I'd never existed. I drove off, headlights cutting through the dusk, my heart collapsing inside my chest. That night, I parked in an empty lot near the pier. The waves were black, furious. I sat there, listening to the ocean crash against concrete, each sound like a heartbeat I'd forgotten was mine. I wanted to scream. To break something. To disappear. Instead, I cried silently until the tears ran dry, until the ache in my chest became something else, something hard and cold and alive. When dawn came, I wiped my face, started the engine, and drove nowhere in particular. Every streetlight blurred past like lost memories. At a red light, I caught my reflection again. I looked empty. Like the version of me they'd spent years sculpting, a woman who existed to make others comfortable. I pressed my palm against the glass and whispered, "Never again." When I reached my office, I went through the motions, emails, clients, deadlines, but my mind was elsewhere. Every sound reminded me of the slam of that door. Every click of the keyboard sounded like their laughter. By evening, exhaustion dragged me back toward that house. I told myself I'd just collect a few things, papers, clothes, maybe the photo of Grandma and me. When I turned onto the street, my headlights caught movement inside the living room. Shadows. Laughter. Music. I parked a few houses away, killed the engine, and sat in silence. I watched them through the window, moving around my home like I was already dead. And then, through the thin crack of the window, I heard my name. "She's too emotional," my mother said. "She'll apologize by next week," my father replied. Amelia laughed. "If not, we'll change the Wi-Fi password. She hates that." They laughed together, clinking glasses. My family. That was the moment my grief turned into resolve. Because love built on humiliation isn't love, it's control. And I was done being controlled. I turned the key in the ignition and whispered to myself, "They think I'll crawl back?" My lips curved into something that felt foreign. A smile. They have no idea. As I drove away, my phone buzzed with a notification from the security camera app, motion detected inside the house. I clicked it. The footage showed my sister whispering something to my father. His answer made my blood run cold. She'll never find out what we're planning next. The night I watched that footage, I sat frozen in my car, the glow of the phone screen painting my face pale blue. The audio crackled, faint but clear enough to slice through the quiet. My sister's voice was soft, conspiratorial. "She won't do anything, Dad. She never does." Then my father's voice, calm, steady, practiced in the art of dismissal. "She'll come begging. She always needs us eventually." That word again, begging. It was their favorite game, their ritual. Push me until I break, then act like they're saving me from my own collapse. I replayed the clip 3 times, each repetition tightening something inside me until I couldn't breathe. They were plotting something, but what? The next morning, I went back. I don't even remember the drive, only the pounding in my chest as I parked a few houses down. The curtains were drawn, but I could see shadows moving inside. Laughter. My laughter once lived there too, before it turned into silence. I waited until nightfall, until the street emptied, then walked up to the side of the house. The cold air stung my face. I moved quietly, my heart hammering. I wanted to catch them, not for revenge, not yet, but for clarity. I needed to know what I was fighting against. Through the thin crack of the living room window, I saw my sister sitting with a glass of wine, her legs tucked under her like she was posing for a photo. My parents were at the table, talking low. I couldn't hear everything, but fragments reached me, enough to piece the story together. "Once she sells, transfer the name. She'll never notice." My stomach dropped. They were talking about selling something. My house. My property. My father's voice sharpened. "We'll say she agreed. We can fake her consent, we've done it before." My sister giggled. "She's so easy. One guilt trip and she melts." I pressed my palm against the cold window pane, willing myself not to burst in. Every instinct screamed to confront them, to rip the lies out of their throats. But I didn't. Not yet. I stayed there, letting their words carve the final piece of truth into me. They didn't love me. They loved access. When my father mentioned calling the agent, I pulled back. I recorded everything on my phone, the voices, the context, the laughter. My hands shook, but I kept filming until I had enough. Then I left, quietly, the way I came. In the car, I replayed the recording. Each word was another nail sealing the coffin of my old life. By morning, I felt sick, not from fear, but from clarity. I realized how deep their betrayal went. They weren't satisfied with using my money. They wanted my foundation, the roof over my head, the very thing that gave me independence. I went to work, but my body moved on autopilot. Every conversation blurred into background noise. I smiled where I was supposed to, answered questions mechanically, but inside I was unraveling. That night, I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I lay on the couch of a friend's apartment, staring at the ceiling, counting the seconds between breaths. The betrayal had a texture, like glass in my throat. Sometime after midnight, I checked my email. There it was, a bank alert. Account activity, frozen due to irregular transfers. My heart stopped. I logged in immediately. My primary account, the one tied to the mortgage, was locked. The message read, "Pending verification of authorization." They had tried to move my money. Again. A wave of nausea hit me so hard I had to steady myself. I called the bank's emergency line, explained the situation, the fraud, the family involvement. The agent said calmly, "Ma'am, we'll investigate, but if your name's on any of the signed transfers, it could take weeks." Weeks. They could do anything in weeks. After hanging up, I sat in darkness, trembling. My sister's face appeared in my mind, smiling, smug, confident. She'd always believed I was powerless, too emotional, too compliant, too forgiving. And for most of my life, she was right. But as I stared at the ceiling, another thought began to bloom, slow, deliberate, dangerous. Maybe the key to fighting them wasn't confrontation. Maybe it was patience. Maybe silence could be louder than any scream. The next day, I called the law office again. David answered on the first ring. "Elena?" His voice was warm, but cautious. "They're trying to sell my house," I said flatly. "And they're freezing my accounts." "Do you have proof?" "Yes. Audio. Documents. Everything." He exhaled slowly. "Good. Don't confront them again. Let me handle it." His calmness steadied me. "What happens now?" "We start by securing the property. I'll file the necessary orders." "But Elena," his tone softened, "you need to understand, this will get ugly. They won't go quietly." I nodded even though he couldn't see me. "Neither will I." That night, I drove back once more. This time, not to listen, but to watch. Through the blinds, I saw them laughing again, surrounded by wine bottles and takeout boxes. The house looked smaller somehow, suffocating under their presence. My father handed Amelia an envelope. She opened it, smiled, and said, "Finally." My stomach twisted. I took out my phone and recorded another clip, zooming in on the document in her hand. The camera caught the seal, a bank logo. A loan, maybe. Or a transfer. Something they shouldn't have. For the first time, I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I simply whispered, "Keep laughing. You're signing your own ending." I walked away under the streetlight, the cold air sharp against my face, feeling something I hadn't in months, power, quiet and growing. They had taken everything from me. But now, I had something they didn't know existed, evidence, patience, and a lawyer who already knew where this was heading. They thought I'd come begging. I was done begging. 2 days later, my phone buzzed again, another alert. This time, it wasn't about money. It was a warning from the city clerk's office, notice of property dispute, title inquiry filed. Someone had officially tried to claim ownership of my house. The email subject burned through me like acid. Notice of property dispute, title under review. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My hands hovered above the keyboard, trembling. I opened the message, scanning each line. Someone, my family, had filed a dispute claiming the property was jointly owned. Attached were documents. Signatures. My name, forged again. I stared at the screen until my eyes blurred. My throat tightened, my chest heavy. They had escalated from stealing money to trying to erase me entirely, from my own home, my own identity. The first tear came quietly. The second hit harder. Then they wouldn't stop. I pressed a fist against my mouth to stifle the sob that tore out anyway. I called David. He answered immediately. "They've filed the dispute," I said, my voice shaking. He swore softly under his breath. "I was expecting it. Don't panic. It's desperate, but it's good for us." "It means they're afraid." "Afraid?" I said bitterly. "They're destroying my life." "Not for long," he said. "Send me the documents. I'll file an injunction to freeze their claim." I forwarded everything, then sat in silence, staring at the empty room around me. My friend's couch had become my refuge, a small island of borrowed safety. I didn't have my own bed anymore. My own kitchen. My own space. They had taken everything. That evening, I drove back to the neighborhood, not to confront, but because I couldn't help it. I parked at the corner, engine off, staring at the house from a distance. The windows glowed warmly. Inside, I saw movement, shadows, laughter, silhouettes I knew better than my own reflection. It was a strange kind of grief, watching your family live comfortably inside your pain. I rolled the window down, the cold air biting at my face. I didn't cry this time. I just watched. Observed. I wanted to remember every detail, the sound of their laughter, the way the porch light flickered, the car in the driveway that wasn't theirs. I thought about knocking. About walking in, screaming, breaking something, making them see what they'd done. But I didn't. Because I knew, deep down, that they'd twist it. They'd call me hysterical. They'd film me again. They'd win the emotional war, even as they stole from me. So instead, I stayed quiet. Quiet was stronger. Quiet meant control. When I finally drove away, my phone buzzed with another notification, overdraft alert. I laughed. Out loud. The sound came out raw, almost hysterical. They'd drained my savings too. I opened the banking app, and there it was, every account overdrawn, every safety net ripped away. The numbers glared back at me like mockery. I felt hollow, stripped bare. My car became my home that night. I parked near the waterfront, wrapped myself in a blanket, and stared at the ceiling through the windshield. The city lights blurred through my tears. The world kept moving, uncaring, while I sat there unraveling. At dawn, I woke to the sound of seagulls and the distant crash of waves. My neck ached, my eyes swollen. I turned the ignition, but the engine sputtered, it was running on fumes. I laughed again. A small, bitter sound. I checked my phone. Dozens of messages. None from them. Just bills. Warnings. Bank notices. When I finally built the courage to drive back to the house, one last time, I found trash bags lined up neatly on the porch. My trash bags. My belongings. Clothes, books, old photos. They'd put them out like waste. I stepped closer, heart pounding. My childhood photo albums were inside one of the bags, pages torn, edges damp from the morning dew. I picked up a photo of myself at 12 years old, smiling awkwardly beside my sister. She had frosting on her nose, laughing mid-breath. I looked invisible even then. I stared at it until my vision blurred, then tucked it into my jacket pocket. The front door opened. My mother appeared, holding a coffee mug. She looked startled for half a second, then sighed. "Oh. It's you." "It's me," I repeated. "You shouldn't just show up," she said sharply. "We're trying to keep peace here." "Peace?" I asked. "You filed a property dispute against me." She rolled her eyes. "Don't be so dramatic. Your father's just handling paperwork." "Paperwork?" I stepped closer. "You forged my signature." Her expression hardened. "We did what we had to. You weren't being reasonable." Reasonable. That word again. I wanted to scream, to shake her, to make her see what she was doing, but her calmness only deepened my despair. She looked through me, not at me, as if I were a problem to be managed, not a daughter to be loved. Behind her, I saw my sister at the top of the stairs, holding her phone, recording. Again. My mother crossed her arms. "You're making a scene." I laughed bitterly. "You threw me out of my own house, drained my money, forged my name, and you think I'm the one making a scene?" Her voice dropped low, venomous. "You always play the victim, Elena. Maybe if you weren't so cold, people wouldn't leave you." That sentence broke me open. I grabbed one of the trash bags, ripping it open, the contents spilling across the porch, clothes, documents, a half-broken mug that had belonged to my grandmother. My mother gasped. My sister kept filming, whispering, "This is gold." I stood there, chest heaving, surrounded by the remnants of my own life, and I realized I had nothing left to lose. "Keep it," I said finally. My voice was quiet, almost peaceful. "All of it. You'll need it more than I do." I turned and walked away, the wind pulling at my hair, my shoes crunching against the gravel. I didn't look back this time. When I reached the end of the driveway, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Ms. Ramirez, a man's voice said. This is Mr. Pierce's office. The injunction has been approved. Your family's claim is frozen. The court will hear your case in 2 weeks. For the first time in months, I exhaled fully. My hand still trembled, but not from fear. From relief. It wasn't over. But it had finally begun. I looked back at the house, my house, and whispered, 2 weeks. 2 weeks until truth had a microphone. That evening, my phone buzzed again. A voicemail from David's office. His tone was calm but urgent. Elena, call me as soon as you can. I found something in your grandmother's trust papers that changes everything. When I got David's voicemail, my hands were still shaking from the cold. I played it 3 times before I could breathe. Elena, call me as soon as you can. I found something in your grandmother's trust papers that changes everything. That sentence looped in my mind as I drove to his office. The roads blurred past, the rain tapping against the windshield like a pulse. I didn't even remember parking, only standing at the glass doors of Graham and Pierce, soaked, trembling, and terrified of hope. David looked up as I entered. His usual calm expression had shifted into something sharper, more alert. I'm glad you came, he said, gesturing to a seat. On the table between us sat a folder thick with papers, bound by a brass clip. I thought I knew everything about the property, I said, my voice thin. It's mine, right? I have the deed. The mortgage. He raised a hand gently. It's yours, Elena. Legally, yes. But the story goes deeper than you think. He opened the folder and turned it toward me. I saw the header, Trust Agreement, Estate of Isabel Ramirez, my grandmother's name. The date was 15 years ago. I thought this was settled when she passed, I said. David leaned forward. It was, but you weren't told everything. Your grandmother structured her estate carefully, to protect you, specifically you. My throat tightened. Protect me from what? He sighed softly. From them. He pulled out the next page, a section labeled Beneficiary Conditions. My name was there, typed neatly. Beneath it, my grandmother's handwriting filled the margins. If Elena ever purchases a home, the trust will quietly secure ownership in her name only, as a safety measure. I stared at the words, numb. Wait, she tied the trust to the house? He nodded. The deed is more than it seems. You didn't just buy that property, the trust paid part of it, guaranteeing sole ownership. No one else, including your parents or sister, can claim rights to it. They were never listed as occupants under the trust's terms. I blinked, struggling to process. So even if they forged documents, they're invalid, he said simply. Every signature they fake, every form they file, it's meaningless. The house legally belongs to you through the trust. You're not just the owner, Elena. You're the sole heir. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the chair, heart pounding. My grandmother had done this for me, a silent act of protection, hidden behind legal language. David continued, there's more. The trust doesn't stop at the property. It includes assets, investments, accounts, and a clause about inheritance distribution. It appears your family was deliberately excluded due to prior misconduct. I felt the air leave my lungs. She knew? He nodded. She must have seen it long ago, the manipulation, the favoritism. She built a wall of law between you and them. You just never knew it existed. I stared at the folder, the words swimming. My grandmother's handwriting looked so alive, so deliberate, like she'd written it knowing one day I'd need her voice to save me. Why didn't anyone tell me? I whispered. David's tone softened. Your parents were informed at the time. There's record of acknowledgement. They knew, Elena. They just never told you. My stomach dropped. They knew the house wasn't theirs? Yes, he said. They've known since the day you signed the purchase papers. They likely assumed you'd never find out about the trust connection. That's why they grew so comfortable. They counted on your silence. For a moment, everything inside me went quiet, too quiet. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was premeditated deceit. All those years of gaslighting, guilt, manipulation, it had been part of a pattern. They weren't just selfish, they were strategic. They'd built their comfort on my ignorance. My grandmother had known. And she'd prepared for this exact moment. David slid a pen across the table. The trust gives you full authority to act as controlling beneficiary. If you want to exercise that right, I'll start the paperwork. I stared at the pen. It looked small, harmless. But in that moment, it felt like a weapon. My fingers hovered over it. If I sign this, what happens? Everything changes, he said. The court case becomes clearer. Their dispute collapses legally. They'll lose any claim, to the property, to the assets, to anything your grandmother left. I thought of my parents laughing at the dinner table, my sister filming my tears, the way they'd looked at me like I was furniture. I thought of the years I'd spent begging to belong, begging for scraps of affection. I picked up the pen. I'm ready. David nodded, sliding the document toward me. The paper felt thick beneath my hand, textured with consequence. My signature flowed in ink, clean, unshaking. For once, I didn't tremble. When I finished, he smiled faintly. There. It's official. A silence followed, thick with relief and disbelief. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. She saved me, I whispered. David nodded. In more ways than one. The trust also includes a clause, what we call a trigger condition. Once the beneficiary's rights are challenged, the trust unlocks an additional reserve. My heart stuttered. A reserve? Yes, he said. A secondary account under your name. Assets held in escrow for emergencies. It's substantial. I swallowed. How substantial? He hesitated, then said quietly, 7 figures. The world tilted again. I pressed my palms against the desk, grounding myself. So, they think they ruined me, but... He smiled faintly. You're far from ruined. The realization hit like sunlight through storm clouds, slow, bright, undeniable. For years, they'd treated me as their dependent, their scapegoat. But the truth was, I had been protected all along by someone who'd seen my strength before I ever did. David handed me a copy of the signed papers. Keep these safe, he said. And Elena, don't tell them yet. Let them think they've won. Silence is leverage. I nodded slowly. For once, I didn't feel like prey. I felt like the storm they never saw coming. As I stood to leave, I looked out the window. The rain had stopped. The city lights shimmered on the wet streets, reflections like promises. They thought I was weak because I stayed quiet. But my grandmother knew better. Silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. And now, the game had changed. As I walked out of the office, David called after me. Elena, one more thing. Your grandmother didn't just leave you money. He held up a sealed envelope. She left you instructions. The envelope was heavy, sealed with a red wax crest I hadn't seen since I was a child. My grandmother used to use the same seal on birthday cards, her initials intertwined like a secret language between us. Ir. Isabel Ramirez. David handed it to me carefully, his tone gentle but deliberate. She left this with the trust papers, he said. Her handwriting's on the front. In faded blue ink, she'd written. For Elena, when they finally show their true selves. My hand shook. You've read it? He shook his head. No. It's yours alone. I held it against my chest for a moment, unable to open it yet. The weight of the wax, the paper, the memory, it felt sacred, as if opening it too soon might shatter something delicate inside me. When I finally stepped out into the rain, the city felt quieter, like it was holding its breath. I sat in my car, the the engine off, listening to the drops tap against the roof. Then, with trembling fingers, I broke the seal. Inside were 3 pages, written in my grandmother's elegant cursive. The first line made my vision blur immediately. "My dearest Elena, I know what silence costs you." I read slowly, the paper trembling between my fingers. "By the time you find this, I will be gone. I pray life has been kinder to you than it was to me, but I fear it will not be. I see the same shadows in our family that I once lived through. The charm, the manipulation, the quiet cruelty that wears the mask of love. I know how they treat you, because they treated me the same way once." I stopped reading, pressing a hand to my mouth. My grandmother, always calm, graceful, dignified, had been through this. The same hierarchy, the same favoritism, the same invisible wounds. I turned the page. "They will try to break you. They will take your softness and twist it into obligation. But remember this, power isn't loud, my love. Power is patience. Power is knowing when to act, and when to let them believe they've won." My tears came quietly this time. Not from pain, but from recognition. From finally being seen. "You come from strength, not servitude. I built this trust so you would never again be at the mercy of those who confuse kindness with weakness. When the time comes, you will have proof, protection, and choice. Do not seek their forgiveness. Seek your freedom." The last line broke me completely. "When you stand in your own house and realize it's truly yours, light a candle for me. I'll be there." I folded the letter carefully, pressing it to my heart. The storm outside blurred the world, but inside that car, everything became clear. My grandmother had lived her own quiet war, and she'd made sure I would win mine. I didn't drive home right away. I sat there for a long time, staring at the envelope, reading the lines over and over until they burned into me like a promise. For years, I'd been told silence made me weak. But now I understood, my silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. It was the space between their arrogance and my preparation. The next morning, I woke early, clear-headed for the first time in months. I made coffee, printed new copies of the trust documents, labeled every folder, and stored backups online. I created a paper trail they couldn't touch. Then, I did something I'd never done before. I visited the house, not as a daughter trying to reason, but as the owner returning to her property. When I pulled up, the porch light was on. My father's car was still parked in the driveway. I didn't knock. I didn't even step out. I just sat there, watching the windows, my grandmother's words echoing in my head. Power is patience. Inside, I saw them moving, laughing, oblivious. My sister danced across the living room, her phone in hand. My mother followed her around, holding a wine glass, pretending the world belonged to them. It wouldn't for much longer. When my phone rang, it was David again. "Elena, we've filed the injunction," he said. "They'll be notified by morning. Legally, they can't sell, rent, or transfer the property now. They're stuck." I smiled faintly. "So the house is frozen?" "Yes," he replied. "And the best part? They won't know you initiated it until the paperwork arrives. They'll think it's from the court directly." "Good," I said softly. "Let them wonder." He paused. "What about the letter? Did you read it?" I hesitated, then said, "Yes." "She knew everything." "I thought she might," he said. "Women like her, they see storms coming before anyone else does." We hung up, and I sat there a moment longer, watching the house that had become a battleground. I thought of every night I'd cried in those rooms, every insult I'd swallowed, every humiliation I'd endured. All of it had led here, to this quiet, deliberate moment of power. I drove away without honking, without a word, leaving them inside their illusion. The rain started again, soft and relentless, washing the streets clean. That night, I placed my grandmother's letter in a frame beside my bed. Her words glowed under the lamplight, each one a weapon and a comfort at once. I whispered, "Thank you. and for the first time in years I slept deeply. Because I finally understood something they never would. I didn't need to fight for their love anymore. I already had something stronger: truth, patience, and a woman's legacy written in ink and law. The next morning, a courier arrived at my door with an envelope stamped "Court Notice, Hearing Date Confirmed." And attached to it, another note from David. "Be ready. This hearing will do more than protect your house. It's about to expose everything they've been hiding." The envelope was thin, official, but the weight of it felt heavier than any object I'd ever held. The words "Court Notice, Hearing Date Confirmed" glared up at me like a doorway I couldn't close again. The attached note from David was short, handwritten this time. "Be ready. This hearing will not just protect your house. It will uncover what they've been hiding all along." I read it twice, then a third time, my fingers trembling. The date, 2 weeks from today. My pulse quickened. 2 weeks until truth had a voice. That night, I took the trust folder out again and spread the papers across the table. The letter from my grandmother lay beside them, her words still etched in my chest like scripture. The more I read, the clearer the pattern became. It wasn't just a safety net, it was a map. Every clause in that trust pointed to one thing: she had known exactly what my parents were capable of. The next morning, I called David. "I want to see everything," I said. "Every clause, every note she left. If she hid things from them, I want to know what." He agreed to meet that afternoon. When I arrived, the office was quiet except for the steady hum of the rain against the windows. David already had a binder waiting on the table, thick and neatly tabbed. The first page bore my grandmother's signature, strong, deliberate, unmistakably hers. "She didn't just build this trust," David said. "She predicted their moves. She prepared for every scenario." He turned to a section labeled Addendum B, Confidential Clause. "She requested this part remain sealed until the first legal challenge against you," he explained. I felt my heartbeat in my ears. "So when they filed the property dispute, it triggered this clause automatically," he finished. "And revealed her final instructions." He slid the document toward me. My grandmother's handwriting filled the page, sharp and elegant even decades later. "If my granddaughter is ever betrayed by blood, this shall activate my will in full transparency. The assets held in trust, the remaining shares, and the estate rights shall pass to her and her alone. The family has no claim, by law or by sentiment." My throat tightened. I could barely read the next lines. "I leave nothing to those who choose greed over love. I raised them better, and they chose otherwise. Let this be my last lesson: the inheritance of cruelty ends here." Tears blurred the ink. My grandmother's voice was so present in every line that it felt like she was sitting beside me again, pouring tea, brushing my hair, whispering secrets about strength. She had always been quiet, never confrontational, but every word here was steel beneath silk. David's voice broke through the silence. "She also documented financial evidence of her own," he said, pointing to the appendix. "Letters, statements, photographs, records of the way they treated her. She saw history repeating, Elena. She didn't just give you money. She gave you protection by design." I swallowed hard. "So they've known all along that they weren't entitled to any of this?" He nodded slowly. "They knew, but they were betting on one thing, that you'd never find out." Something inside me shifted again, deeper than anger, deeper than grief. It was understanding. Cold, quiet understanding. All those years they'd said, "You're lucky we let you in," when in truth, they'd been standing in my house, eating my food, spending my money, protected only by my ignorance. I felt my hands curl into fists on the table. "They built their entire power on me not knowing," I said softly. "Yes," David said. "And now you know." He watched me for a moment, then added carefully, "The will also includes one final clause. It's unusual, but it gives you additional leverage." "What kind?" "Her legal instructions allow for a full public disclosure, if you choose it. Meaning, during the hearing, everything, every document, every fraudulent charge, every lie, can become public record. Once that happens, their reputation will never recover. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My mind filled with images, my sister's smug smile, my father's dismissive tone, my mother's cold stare. The perfect facade they'd built their entire lives, shattered by the truth they buried. David leaned back, watching me closely. "You don't have to decide now," he said. "But if you want to end this completely, legally and socially, that's how you do it." I looked down at my grandmother's final words. "The inheritance of cruelty ends here." I closed my eyes, inhaled deeply, and said quietly, "She didn't mean end it with forgiveness. She meant end it with justice." David nodded once. "Then we proceed." We spent the next hour reviewing the legal path forward, ownership verification, fraud documentation, witness statements, the injunction terms. Every step was deliberate, careful, precise. By the time I signed the last page, my fear had turned into something sharper, clarity. Before I left, David said, "You realize they're going to fight. They'll get ugly. They'll say anything." "I know," I said. "But I don't care. They built this storm. I'm just learning how to use it." Outside, the rain had stopped. The sky glowed pale silver, and the reflection of the office lights shimmered on the wet pavement. I stood there for a long time, clutching my grandmother's letter, feeling her strength humming beneath my skin like a quiet heartbeat. I didn't drive straight home. Instead, I stopped by the florist near the edge of town. The woman behind the counter asked if I needed anything special. I pointed to a small white candle on the shelf. "Just this," I said. That night, I returned to my house. My house. I didn't go inside, I wasn't ready yet, but I stood at the edge of the yard, lit the candle, and placed it on the porch step. The tiny flame flickered against the darkness, steady and defiant. "Thank you," I whispered to the woman who'd seen me before I ever saw myself. The glow reflected faintly in the window, and for a heartbeat, I could almost swear I saw her, smiling from inside, calm, proud, unafraid. The next morning, David called. "Elena," he said. "The injunction worked. But your parents just filed a motion to counterclaim your ownership. They've hired a new lawyer, your sister's ex-husband." I froze. He added softly, "They're bringing family into the courtroom now." When David called with the news that my sister's ex-husband, Daniel, was representing them, my blood went cold. Of all people. The man who used to brag about manipulating contracts for sport. The man who once cornered me at a dinner table and said, "You're too naive for this family, Elena. They'll eat you alive." Maybe he'd been right once. But not anymore. "Let him come," I told David quietly. "I have more evidence than he has excuses." That night, I sat in my small rented apartment surrounded by paper. Stacks of receipts, screenshots, printouts, my life reduced to ink and proof. The air smelled like toner and exhaustion. Every sound, the shuffle of paper, the scrape of my pen, felt like preparation for battle. For years, I had collected pain. Now I was collecting facts. The first folder was labeled financial fraud. It held everything, the luxury trip receipts, the forged authorization form, the timestamps of their transactions. I highlighted every line that bore my name. The second was property evidence, the trust, the deed, the inheritance clauses, my grandmother's handwriting spelling my name like a benediction. The third, audio recordings. My thumb hovered over my phone before pressing play. Their voices filled the room again, smug, unfiltered. "We'll say she agreed. She's too soft to fight us. She won't dare go to court." Hearing it used to make me sick. Now it made me smile. I labeled each recording by date, uploaded backups to the cloud, and sent copies to David's office. Next, I opened my journal. The one I'd started years ago, the one full of every insult, every dismissal, every subtle cruelty they'd thrown my way. Reading it was like walking through a haunted house of memories. July 8th, Mom told me I'm too cold to deserve love. September 12th, Dad laughed when I said no to lending money. October 2nd, Amelia said I should be grateful they still talk to me. Page after page of emotional bruises. Proof they couldn't gaslight away. I didn't know if any of it would be admissible in court, but I needed it for me. To remember the truth. To remind myself that I hadn't imagined it. That survival wasn't weakness, it was endurance. By midnight, my dining table looked like a crime scene, stacks of paper, labeled USB drives, highlighters bleeding neon trails across documents. I stared at the chaos, then whispered to myself, they built their case on arrogance. I'll build mine on detail. The next day, I met with David. He looked almost impressed when I walked in carrying 2 heavy binders. You weren't kidding about documentation, he said, smiling faintly. I've had years of training, I replied dryly. We spread everything across the table. He organized it into categories: financial, property, behavioral. The goal isn't just to prove ownership, he said. It's to expose a pattern of exploitation. Judges respond to consistency. We'll show how every lie connects. For the first time in months, I felt steady. Focused. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was building a weapon. While David reviewed the files, I sat back and studied his office wall, a framed certificate for Litigator of the Year, and beneath it, a small plaque engraved with a quote, "Truth is quiet. Lies demand applause." It hit me then. That was what my grandmother had understood all along. Truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to wait for silence. When we finished, David closed the binders with a satisfying thud. This is enough to bury them, he said. Good, I said. Because I'm done being their foundation. As I left his office, I felt the kind of calm that follows storms, the stillness before lightning strikes again. That night, I drove past the house. The for sale sign hadn't gone up yet, but I knew it would soon. They still believed they could outmaneuver me, that the court would pity their theatrics. I watched from across the street as my sister stepped out to take a call. Her laughter carried through the quiet, bright and venomous. She leaned against my car, without even realizing I was there. I recorded the timestamp, the scene, her voice. Another piece for the binder. When she hung up, she turned toward the window and said to someone inside, "It doesn't matter what Elena does. Danielle says we've got this handled." I smiled in the dark. "We'll see," I whispered. Back home, I placed the final folder into a box labeled Evidence, Phase 1 and sealed it with tape. Then I sat on the floor, staring at it. For a long time I didn't move. My hands were still, my mind quiet. I thought about every version of myself they'd tried to erase, the obedient daughter, the scapegoat sister, the desperate peacekeeper. I thought about how much time I'd wasted explaining my pain to people who profited from it. No more explanations. Only proof. When I finally stood, my body ached but my spirit didn't. I turned off the light, leaving the box in the center of the room like a monument to everything I'd endured. And in the darkness, one truth settled in me like steel. They'd taught me cruelty through humiliation. My grandmother had taught me strategy through silence. Now, I was going to teach them consequence through evidence. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a message from David. Filed the first set of documents. They'll be served within 48 hours. Are you ready? I typed back one word. Always. An hour later, a courier texted me a photo, notice of eviction delivered, signed by Amelia Ramirez. When the photo of the eviction notice appeared on my phone, I didn't move for almost a full minute. There it was, crisp, official, undeniable. A white envelope stamped with court-ordered notice of eviction taped to the front door of my house. The signature at the bottom was hers. Amelia Ramirez. She had actually signed for it. I could almost imagine her expression, the smirk vanishing, the confusion dawning, the realization that the walls around her were no longer hers to command. David called moments later. They'd been served, he said. 30 days. Legally binding, uncontestable given the trust. They'll panic. I could hear papers rustling on his end. Be prepared for calls, texts, even visits. Don't engage. I won't, I said quietly. They're the ones who taught me silence. When the call ended, I set the phone down and let the stillness sink in. The sound of victory didn't roar, it hummed. Low. Steady. Like a current under the skin. By afternoon, the storm began. My sister called first. 6 missed calls. Then my mother. Then my father. By the 7th ring, I switched my phone to silent. Their messages came flooding in, texts, voicemails, even emails. Elena, what did you do? This is a misunderstanding. You can't just throw your family out. We raised you. Each word felt like déjà vu, the same manipulation dressed in desperation. But this time, their power had no home to hide in. When I finally opened one voicemail, it was my sister's voice, raw and trembling but still venomous. You've gone too far. Daniel says this isn't over. You think you're clever with your little lawyer? We'll see who the court believes when they hear what kind of person you really are. I listened twice, then saved the audio file and labeled it Threat 1. Evidence was evidence, no matter how shrill. By evening, the quiet felt heavier. The kind of silence that comes before collapse. I poured tea, sat by the window, and watched the rain begin to fall, slow, rhythmic, steady. It was almost peaceful. Then headlights flooded the driveway. I froze. Through the curtain, I saw their silhouettes, my parents and Amelia. They were standing in the rain, umbrellas shaking, faces tight with fury. I didn't move. A hard knock rattled the door. Elena, my mother shouted. Open this door right now. I stood there in the dark, pulse steady, eyes dry. Another knock, harder this time. Elena. This isn't funny. When I didn't answer, my sister's voice broke through, shrill, desperate. You can't do this. You can't just lock us out. That's our house. I almost laughed. The irony was too sharp to ignore. I took a slow breath, whispered to no one, you mean my house. Then I stepped back into the shadows and let them shout. After 20 minutes, their words turned from fury to pleading. My mother's tone cracked. Please, Lena. Think about what you're doing. We're family. Family. That word used to break me. Now it just sounded like noise. When they finally left, I watched their taillights fade through the rain. The driveway was littered with footprints and the soggy remnants of the eviction notice they'd ripped down. I smiled faintly. Another copy was already filed at the courthouse. They could tear paper, but not the law. The next morning, I met David again. He was reviewing the signed confirmation when I walked in. They came to my door, I said flatly. He didn't even look surprised. They'll keep pushing. Emotional manipulation is their default. You just need to stay untouchable. I didn't even open the door, I said. Good, he said. They'll realize soon enough that the law doesn't open it either. He slid another document toward me, a property listing draft. What's this? I asked. Our next step, he said. You can sell. You can rent. You can reclaim full use. It's up to you. But I suggest we move fast before they find another loophole. I stared at the paper. The words for sale by owner looked surreal. That house had once been my dream and my prison. Now, it was leverage. Do it, I said. David smiled. Already in motion. The sign goes up tomorrow morning. I nodded, my pulse quick but steady. Then let it be the first thing they see when they wake up. The following dawn, I drove past the house. It was early, gray, the world still half asleep. The for sale sign stood tall on the lawn, gleaming under the streetlight, planted firm in the wet soil. I parked across the street and waited. The curtains moved. My mother's silhouette appeared first, then my father's. Finally, Amelia stepped into view, robe clutched around her, hair wild. Her face twisted as she read the sign. Even from here, I could imagine the words coming out of her mouth: disbelief, denial, rage. She stormed outside, grabbed the sign, and tried to yank it out of the ground. It didn't budge. She screamed something I couldn't hear and kicked it instead. My father joined her, waving his phone, no doubt calling Daniel. I smiled and whispered, "Right on schedule." My phone buzzed a moment later, a message from David. The realtor confirmed the listing is live. Offers already coming in. You did it. Did it. The phrase didn't feel like triumph yet. It felt like calm after suffocation. Like breathing for the first time without waiting for permission. I started the car, took one last look at the house that had been both my sanctuary and my battlefield, and whispered, "You can keep the ghosts. I'm taking back the light." As I drove away, the first ray of sun broke through the clouds, soft, hesitant, almost shy. It hit the edge of the for sale sign, making it glow like a quiet declaration of war. An hour later, my phone rang again, this time, not from David. A blocked number. I answered, expecting another threat. A deep male voice said, "Ms. Ramirez? This is Detective Owens with the Financial Crimes Division. We've received a report regarding the charges on your credit card. There's more to it than you think." Detective Owens' voice was low and measured, the kind that made every word feel like a verdict waiting to fall. "We've received a report regarding the luxury travel charges made on your account, Ms. Ramirez. It appears your sister didn't act alone." My hand tightened around the phone. "What do you mean?" He paused before answering. "There are linked transactions from another card under the same booking, same destination, same agency. It was paid using a joint account your parents manage. That's what flagged it. They were all involved." My breath caught. "So, they used my identity to fund a trip they planned together?" "Yes," he said. "And it qualifies as organized financial fraud. Do you want to press charges?" I looked around my quiet apartment. Stacks of papers. Binders labeled evidence. The echo of their laughter still haunted every memory I had of that house. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "Every single one of them." He gave a slow, approving exhale. "Then we'll proceed. You'll be contacted with a statement request this week." When the call ended, I sat in silence. For the first time in years, my fear didn't feel like weakness, it felt like armor. The law wasn't just on my side now, it was in motion, gathering momentum. I picked up my grandmother's letter from the table and traced her handwriting. Power is patience. She had been right all along. That afternoon, David called. "Elena, we got an offer," he said. "Cash buyer. They want immediate closing." "Already?" "Yes. It's high, above market value. They seem eager." A flicker of suspicion passed through me. "Who's the buyer?" There was a rustle of paper before he answered. "Someone named Allison Pierce." I blinked. "Pierce?" "Yes," he said. "No relation to me, as far as I know. She's in real estate investment. Her offer letter says she's familiar with the case and wants to expedite your process. She's even offering to handle the transfer of your grandmother's trust property tax-free." Something in the phrasing caught me, familiar with the case. "She knows about my case?" David hesitated. "Only what's public. Some people follow property hearings, especially ones involving trusts and estates. She might just be an opportunist who admires a good recovery story." I didn't buy it, not fully, but the price was good. The house had become a mausoleum anyway, every room a reminder of humiliation turned into proof. "Accept it," I said finally. "Let her buy it." "You're sure?" "Yes," I said. "That house doesn't deserve another day of my life." The sale moved fast, faster than I expected. Within a week, the paperwork was signed, the payment cleared, and the ownership transfer confirmed. I stood outside the courthouse that morning holding the final deed in my hands, my name cleanly replaced with Allison Pierce. The air felt different. Lighter. Like I had stepped out of someone else's shadow. David came out of the building, smiling faintly. Congratulations. It's done. It doesn't feel real, I said. It will, he replied. When you see them realize it's over. He wasn't wrong. When I drove past the house later that evening, I found my family on the porch. My father was shouting into his phone. My mother stood motionless, her hands over her mouth. Amelia sat on the steps, staring at the lawn sign that now read sold in red letters. I parked half a block away and watched, silent. From this distance, they looked small, silhouettes swallowed by the weight of their own decisions. The police cruiser parked nearby made the picture complete. I didn't need to hear what was being said to know what it meant. The detective had kept his word. Later that night, I received an email from Detective Owens. The subject line was simple. Case update, fraud investigation, Ramirez family. Inside, his message was short and clinical. Preliminary evidence confirms joint intent in fraudulent charges and identity misuse. A formal notice will be delivered for your statement. Recommend securing all accounts and assets immediately. Below his signature was a scanned copy of an internal report, including bank screenshots, travel records, even hotel invoices. Amelia's name. My father's card. My mother's authorization email. Every lie, finally on paper. I closed the laptop slowly and exhaled. It was strange, justice didn't feel like fire. It felt like quiet. A clean, almost sacred silence. I poured myself a glass of water, sat by the window, and watched the streetlights blur into gold streaks against the night. That's when my phone buzzed. A new text. Unknown number. You think selling the house makes you untouchable? Wait till court. Daniel's not done with you. I smiled, took a screenshot, and sent it straight to Detective Owens and David. 2 minutes later, David replied. Perfect. Another threat on record. Keep collecting, Elena. Every word they say builds your wall higher. I looked at that text and realized something vital. For the first time in my life, I wasn't defending myself, I was documenting their collapse. 2 days later, I met Allison Pierce. She'd requested a brief handshake meeting as a courtesy to the previous owner. She was poised, maybe mid-40s, with calm eyes and a confidence that felt familiar. Her handshake was warm but firm. I hope you don't mind me saying this, she said softly, but your grandmother was a remarkable woman. My breath caught. You knew her? She smiled faintly. A long time ago. We worked together on community projects. Isabel once told me she was preparing a trust for her granddaughter, said she wanted someone who would grow into her own fire, not her family's shadow. I stared at her, unable to speak. She squeezed my hand gently. I think she'd be proud of how you handled yourself. For a moment, the noise of the world faded. Just those words, simple and grounding. She already was, Allison added. She used to say, Elena's silence is her sword. I never forgot that. When she left, I sat in my car and cried for the first time in weeks, not from grief, but from gratitude. My grandmother's reach extended further than I ever imagined. Even now, she was still protecting me through the kindness of others. That night, I received another call from David. The court date's been moved up, he said. The judge wants this handled immediately. It'll be next Friday. Good, I said. The sooner it's done, the sooner I can breathe. He hesitated. There's something else, the buyers want you to attend the closing ceremony. Apparently, they plan to donate part of the property proceeds to a women's legal defense fund, under your grandmother's name. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. She's still saving people, I whispered. David's voice softened. And now you are too. The next morning, I woke to a letter slid under my door, thick, unmarked, smelling faintly of cologne. Inside was a single note written in Daniel's handwriting. You think you've won? We still have one thing left that's yours. Attached was a photo, my grandmother's antique necklace, the one that had vanished from the house months ago. The necklace in the photo stopped my breath. My grandmother's antique gold pendant, the one she wore in every picture, the one she promised I'd inherit, was dangling from someone's fingers. I could tell from the angle that the photo was taken inside my old house. The wallpaper in the background still bore the faint watermark I'd tried to scrub out years ago. They had it. They'd taken it before the eviction. And Daniel's note, "We still have one thing left that's yours," was more than taunting. It was a threat. I sent the image to David immediately. Within a minute, my phone buzzed. "David, I'll forward this to Detective Owens. Don't respond to him. We'll handle it in court." Me, "He won't stop." David, "He doesn't have to. You already won the law. Now you just have to show it." The court hearing was set for Friday morning. For days, I barely slept. I replayed every memory like a film I couldn't pause, their laughter echoing through the house, the forged documents, the mockery, the betrayal. But beneath the nerves, something new had rooted itself in me, calm determination. The day before the hearing, David called with last-minute details. "Tomorrow's going to be intense," he said. "They're bringing witnesses, maybe even character testimonies. But we have every document, every recording. You stay composed, and let the truth do the talking." "I will," I said. He paused. "Wear something that makes you feel protected. Not powerful, protected. It matters." I thought of my grandmother again. The candle. The letter. The words she'd written, "When you stand in your own house and realize it's truly yours, light a candle for me." So I did. I lit one that night, placed it by my window, and whispered, "Be with me tomorrow." The courthouse smelled of old wood and disinfectant, history and bureaucracy mixed together. The air was cold, sharp with tension. I arrived early, dressed in a black suit I'd bought years ago for interviews that never went anywhere. It felt right, clean, understated, armor without arrogance. David was already waiting, folders in hand, his tie slightly loosened. He smiled faintly when he saw me. "You look ready." "I am," I said, surprising myself with how true it felt. When we entered the courtroom, my family was already there. My father sat rigid, jaw clenched. My mother's eyes darted everywhere but mine. Amelia slouched in her chair beside Daniel, whispering furiously. She looked smaller than I remembered, not the golden child anymore, but a spoiled performer realizing the audience had left. She glared when I walked in. I met her stare without flinching. The bailiff called for order. The judge, an older woman with eyes that saw through performances, entered, her robe sweeping across the floor like quiet thunder. "All rise." We did. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. "Be seated." The gavel struck once. The clerk read the case title, "Ramirez vs. Ramirez, Property Dispute and Financial Misuse." Hearing my own name split in two like that made something in me ache, as if the court itself was dividing bloodlines into evidence. David began calmly, methodically. He presented the trust first, the original deed, the clauses, the notarized documents. Each piece was like a stone laid carefully into place. The judge listened without expression, her pen moving steadily. When Daniel stood to respond, he was slick, the kind of charm that used to make my sister swoon. "Your Honor," he said smoothly, "my clients merely acted under the assumption that this property was shared family inheritance. There was no malicious intent. Only misunderstanding." David didn't interrupt. He waited. When Daniel tried to spin it, calling me overly emotional, saying I'd misinterpreted her family's generosity, the judge's brow lifted slightly. That single movement felt like a victory. Then David stood again. His voice was low but sharp enough to cut glass. "With respect, Your Honor, we have evidence to the contrary. Exhibit A, audio recording dated February 6. He pressed play. My sister's voice filled the room. We'll say she agreed. She's too soft to fight us. Then my father's. She'll come begging. She always does. The courtroom fell into stunned silence. Even Daniel froze. My mother's hands trembled. Amelia's face went white. David let the silence stretch, then said softly, "Does that sound like misunderstanding, Your Honor?" The judge didn't answer. She simply nodded for him to continue. He laid down more evidence, the forged signature forms, the bank transfers, the luxury trip invoices. Every piece landed like thunder rolling closer. Finally, David turned to me. "Ms. Ramirez, would you please state, under oath, who authorized these transactions?" "I didn't," I said, my voice clear. "I was working double shifts. I found out through an alert from my bank. They used my name, my card, and my silence. Why didn't you confront them sooner?" I looked at my family. Because I thought they loved me. And I thought love meant forgiveness. The judge's pen paused mid-note. David nodded. No further questions. When it was Daniel's turn again, he tried to pivot, desperation replacing arrogance. "Your Honor, if we may." But the judge held up a hand. "Enough." Her tone was quiet, final. "The evidence speaks clearly. The court acknowledges the validity of the trust, the unlawful use of personal accounts, and the proven forgery of authorization." My pulse quickened. "Until closing arguments," she continued, "this court recognizes Ms. Elena Ramirez as the sole lawful owner of the disputed property." A tremor ran through me. My vision blurred, not from tears, but from relief that felt almost unbearable. Behind me, my sister hissed, "This isn't over." My father muttered something under his breath. But their voices sounded distant, like echoes from a place I'd already left. The judge called for recess. David touched my shoulder lightly. "We're halfway there," he whispered. "The verdict comes next." I nodded, still trying to process the moment. The walls of the courtroom felt less like a cage now, more like a cathedral. A place where truth finally had somewhere to breathe. As I stepped out into the hallway, my phone buzzed. A message from Detective Owens. "Evidence from the travel agency just came in. You'll want to see this before the verdict. It involves your sister's second account, and someone you didn't expect." I opened Detective Owens' message right there in the courthouse hallway. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear this time, but from the strange calm that comes before an explosion. "Evidence from the travel agency just came in," his message read. "You'll want to see this before the verdict. It involves your sister's second account, and someone you didn't expect." Attached was a PDF. I clicked it open. The first page displayed a wire transfer confirmation, $14,700 from my credit card. I knew that one. But the second line, the linked account, was what made my breath stop. It wasn't just my parents. The account name was Daniel Pierce. My sister's ex-husband. The man who had been standing across from me in court not 10 minutes ago. I stared at it, reading the fine print twice, 3 times. The authorization code matched the booking date. He had helped them book the trip, maybe even initiated it, then turned around to represent them legally, pretending he was just their lawyer. The manipulation was almost elegant in its cruelty. I called Detective Owens immediately. "You're saying Daniel was part of the fraud?" "Yes," he said. His credit card and IP address were both used during the transaction. He was in on it, likely orchestrated it. That makes this more than a family dispute. It's financial conspiracy. I exhaled shakily. "Can I use this today?" "Absolutely," he said. "Forward it to your attorney. The judge will want to see it." When I hung up, my reflection in the courtroom glass door looked foreign, composed, but dangerous. I texted David, attaching the files. His reply came almost instantly. "Oh, this changes everything. Don't worry. I'll take care of it." When we reconvened after recess, the air was thicker. Even the judge seemed to sense it. David stood immediately. Your Honor, with permission, I'd like to submit new evidence provided by the Financial Crimes Division this morning. It concerns a conflict of interest with opposing counsel. Daniel stiffened. What is this? The judge raised an eyebrow. Proceed, Mr. Pierce. David laid the printouts on the bench. These are verified records from the luxury travel agency responsible for the fraudulent charges. As you can see, the secondary payment method for the $14,700 booking belongs to Daniel Pierce, opposing counsel. A ripple of shock moved through the courtroom. My mother gasped. Amelia's head snapped toward Daniel. What? She whispered, voice cracking. The judge frowned. Mr. Pierce, is this accurate? Daniel straightened his tie, his smirk faltering. Your Honor, I may have facilitated the transaction at the request of my clients. Facilitated? David interrupted. You participated. You profited. And then you represented them against the victim of your own crime. That's not facilitation, that's fraud and obstruction. The room erupted into murmurs. The judge slammed her gavel once. Order. Daniel tried to recover, his voice climbing in pitch. Your Honor, these are personal family matters. But the judge cut him off, her tone sharp as glass. Mr. Pierce, you will remain silent until I've reviewed this evidence. Your bar license may be in jeopardy. Amelia's face crumpled. She turned to him, eyes wide. You told me you fixed it, she hissed. He looked away. David stepped forward, calm and deliberate. Your Honor, this new evidence confirms that the plaintiff's family conspired with their legal representative to commit identity fraud and property manipulation against Ms. Ramirez. It further validates every claim presented in this court. The judge nodded slowly. Noted. The documents are hereby entered into record. I felt something inside me loosen, the final knot untangling. My heart was beating fast, but my mind was clear. For once, they weren't the ones in control of the narrative. David continued. Your Honor, in light of this, we request immediate judgment. This case is no longer about misunderstanding or familial conflict. It's about theft, deception, and violation of trust, financial and emotional. The judge looked at me. Ms. Ramirez, would you like to say anything before we proceed? I stood, hands clasped in front of me. The room quieted. I looked at the people who had once called themselves my family, their faces pale, hollow, cornered. I don't want revenge, I said softly. I just want the truth to be louder than their lies. I glanced at Amelia. Her mascara was smudged, her jaw trembling. You said I was too soft to fight you, I continued. You were right. I was. But softness doesn't mean weakness. It means I believed love could fix what cruelty broke. The judge's gaze didn't waver. And now? Now, I said, I understand that peace without justice is just another form of silence. And I've been silent long enough. The courtroom was still. Even David didn't move. The judge finally spoke. Thank you, Ms. Ramirez. Then she turned to Daniel. Mr. Pierce, this court recommends immediate recusal and refers your conduct to the State Bar for review. Daniel's face drained of color. My sister leaned forward, whispering frantically to my parents. He said he'd protect us. He said he'd make her look unstable. Her words echoed across the room, thin and desperate. David didn't even hide his smile. When the judge called for closing arguments, Daniel was gone. He'd walked out quietly, leaving my family alone at the table. They looked smaller than ever, like puppets cut from their strings. David approached the bench once more, voice low and sure. Your Honor, we rest our case. The judge nodded. The court will issue its final verdict tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. She struck the gavel. The sound was clean, final, irreversible. As the courtroom emptied, I stayed seated for a moment. I watched them gather their things, my mother's trembling hands, my father's silence, Amelia's tear-streaked face. They didn't look like villains anymore. They just looked exposed. David placed a hand on my shoulder. "You okay?" I nodded. "Yes." For the first time in a long time. We stepped outside into the late afternoon sun. It was warm, brighter than it had any right to be after everything that had happened. David turned to me. "Tomorrow, the verdict will seal this. No more claims, no more threats. Just closure." "Closure," I repeated, the word foreign on my tongue. He smiled faintly. "Get some rest, Elena. Tomorrow, you get your life back." That night, I sat at my desk with my grandmother's candle lit again. The flame swayed gently, its light reflecting in the framed letter beside it. I whispered, "It's almost over." But deep down, I knew something else was coming. Because people like my family don't go down quietly. They explode. At 2:13 a.m., my phone buzzed. A video message from an unknown number. I pressed play, and froze. Amelia's voice filled the room, shaking and breathless. "Elena. I didn't mean for this to go so far. But you need to know. Dad's planning something for court tomorrow. Please, be careful." I didn't sleep that night. I played Amelia's message over and over until dawn. Her voice trembled, uneven, real. The same girl who once filmed my tears for fun now sounded terrified. "Dad's planning something for court tomorrow. Please, be careful." What could he possibly plan? The evidence was irrefutable. The law was on my side. But with my father, logic never mattered, control did. By 9 a.m., I was standing outside the courthouse, heart thudding against my ribs. The air was heavy, overcast, the kind of gray that warned of rain. David arrived moments later, calm as always, his briefcase in one hand and coffee in the other. "You ready?" he asked. "I'm not sure anyone ever is," I said. He gave a small, reassuring nod. "Just remember, you don't have to prove you're good. You already proved they were wrong." Inside, the courtroom buzzed with low whispers. The benches were fuller today, journalists, maybe, or curious observers drawn to the spectacle of family turned enemy. My family sat together at the plaintiff's table, but the unity was gone. My mother's eyes were red. My sister stared straight ahead, her hands clasped tight. My father was rigid, jaw set, eyes burning with that familiar, punishing silence. Daniel's chair was empty. His absence said more than any words could. When the judge entered, the murmurs died instantly. "All rise." We did. "Be seated." The gavel struck once, echoing through the still air. This court reconvenes for the verdict in Ramirez versus Ramirez. David leaned close and whispered, "No matter what happens, don't react to him. He'll try to bait you." He didn't have to explain who him was. My father had been baiting me since childhood, every word, every sigh, every disappointed glance a carefully sharpened weapon. The judge began with a summary of findings. After review of all evidence, including financial records, audio documentation, and testimony, the court concludes that the trust established by the late Isabel Ramirez is valid and binding. My breath caught. She continued. "The property in question, along with any assets derived from the trust, are solely owned by Ms. Elena Ramirez." A ripple moved through the crowd. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My sister whispered something inaudible. My father didn't move. The judge went on. Furthermore, the court finds substantial evidence of identity misuse and forgery committed by the plaintiffs, with participation from their legal representative, Mr. Daniel Pierce, now under separate investigation. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. In accordance with these findings, the court hereby orders full restitution to Ms. Ramirez in the amount of all verified fraudulent expenses, plus damages for emotional distress and unlawful eviction attempts. Additionally, a restraining order will be issued, effective immediately. David's hand tightened briefly on my shoulder. My pulse raced, but my body felt oddly detached, as though I were watching it all from a distance. The gavel struck again. Judgment in favor of the defendant. Case closed. The room erupted. My mother began to cry openly. Amelia buried her face in her hands. My father stood up abruptly, his chair screeching against the floor. His voice cut through the chaos, low, dangerous. "This isn't justice," he said. "This is revenge." The judge looked up, unimpressed. "Mr. Ramirez, you are out of order." He ignored her. His eyes locked on mine, dark and furious. "You think this makes you powerful, Elena? You think this is victory? You just killed your family." For a second, I almost believed him, because he said it the way he always did, with conviction that made lies sound holy. But then David stepped between us. "She didn't kill anything, Mr. Ramirez. She survived what you built." Security moved closer. My father's voice broke into a snarl. "You ungrateful." The bailiff's hand landed on his shoulder, firm. "Sir, that's enough." He shoved the man off, pointing at me. "You'll regret this. You'll regret all of this." I stood there, silent, steady, meeting his rage with calm. "I already did," I said softly. "For 34 years. The judge slammed the gavel one last time. Court adjourned. Outside, the air was cold, the wind sharp against my face. I could still hear the echo of the gavel in my ears, rhythmic and final. Reporters gathered at the steps, shouting questions, cameras flashing. I ignored them. David guided me toward the curb where his car waited. "Let them talk," he said. "They're not your story anymore." We stopped near the sidewalk. For a moment, I couldn't move. I was free, legally, financially, emotionally, but the feeling hadn't reached my bones yet. David handed me a folder. "All finalized copies," he said. "You're officially in control. Property, assets, everything your grandmother left is now secure under your name." I opened it. My name stared back at me in bold ink, Elena Ramirez, sole owner. A part of me wanted to cry, but the tears didn't come. They weren't needed. "Thank you," I said. He smiled. "Don't thank me. Thank yourself. You fought this with grace when most people would have gone to war." As he turned to leave, my phone buzzed again, a new message. Unknown number. I hesitated before opening it. It was Amelia. "I'm sorry. I didn't know how far he'd go. He said he'd rather burn it all down than let you have it. Please, watch your back." A chill crept down my spine. I scanned the street automatically. Across the road, a car idled too long. Black sedan. Tinted windows. The engine hummed low, steady. My chest tightened. David followed my gaze. "Elena?" I forced a breath. "It's nothing." But I wasn't sure. The sedan pulled away slowly, turning the corner, disappearing into traffic. David frowned. "If you feel unsafe, I can call Owens." I shook my head. "No. He's done. He just doesn't know it yet." That evening, I drove to the cemetery. The sky was streaked with gray, the first hints of rain pressing down like memory. I carried a single candle and my grandmother's framed letter. Her grave was simple, marble, clean, elegant. I knelt beside it and lit the candle, shielding the flame from the wind. "It's over," I whispered. "You were right. Power isn't loud. It's quiet. It's patient." The flame flickered, steadying against the breeze. Somewhere behind me, thunder rumbled, soft, distant, like applause. As I stood to leave, my phone buzzed one more time. A new message. "You took everything, Elena. Now I'll take back what's mine." Attached was a photo, my grandmother's necklace again. But this time, it wasn't lying on a table. It was hanging from my front doorknob. The moment I saw the photo, every drop of warmth drained from my body. My grandmother's necklace, the one she'd worn every day of her life, dangling from my doorknob like a warning. The background was unmistakable, the chipped blue paint, the brass keyhole, the number 4 etched slightly crooked above the frame. It was my apartment door. Someone had been here. Recently. My first instinct was disbelief. Then, a slow, creeping fear slid down my spine like ice water. I walked to the peephole, half expecting to see a shadow waiting. Nothing. Just the quiet hallway, washed in flickering fluorescent light. I called David immediately. He picked up on the first ring. Elena? It's him, I whispered. He was here. He left her necklace, on my door. There was a pause, then the sound of paper rustling. You're sure it's him? Yes. He sent me a picture before I even noticed it. He wanted me to see it first. Lock every window and door, David said firmly. I'm calling Detective Owens. Don't touch anything. I hung up, my fingers trembling, and did as he said. The locks clicked, one by one, but it didn't make me feel safe. I sat on the floor, back against the wall, staring at the door as though it could breathe. The necklace lay there like a ghost between us. Minutes later, my phone rang again. Ms. Ramirez? Detective Owen's steady voice filled the silence. Officers are on the way. Stay inside. We'll sweep the building. Do you think he'll come back? I asked quietly. We're going to make sure he doesn't, he said. The line went dead. For a while, I just sat there, listening, to the hum of the fridge, the distant elevator doors, my own heartbeat pounding against the quiet. When the knock finally came, I jumped so hard I dropped my phone. Police. 2 officers stood outside when I opened the door, flashlights cutting through the dim hallway. One of them carefully bagged the necklace, the other asked me to sit. I answered their questions mechanically. When I received the text, what it said, whether anyone had keys. Only my landlord and my lawyer, I said. But the necklace, it's from my grandmother's house. It was missing after my family was evicted. The officer nodded. We'll run prints and check the building cameras. You're not alone anymore, Ms. Ramirez. That sentence almost broke me. You're not alone anymore. When they left, the apartment felt different, hollow, fragile. Every sound made me flinch. I turned on all the lights, sat by the window, and watched the street below. It was quiet, except for the low hum of city life. But my body wouldn't believe it. My muscles stayed coiled, ready to react. Around midnight, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from an unknown number, but not Daniel's voice, my father's. You think you won. You think we're finished. But family doesn't end with paper, Elena. Blood doesn't freeze. My chest tightened. I typed back before I could stop myself. Blood doesn't excuse crimes. Seconds later, his reply came. You sound just like her. Your grandmother. Stubborn. That woman tore this family apart, and you finished the job. I stared at the words until they blurred. The anger was familiar, almost nostalgic, his ability to twist truth into guilt. But it didn't work anymore. I blocked the number. Then, for the first time in my life, I let myself cry not from pain but from exhaustion. From the sheer absurdity of being hunted by the people who once claimed to love me. I fell asleep near dawn, the faint light of morning creeping across the floorboards. The next day, David came by in person. He looked worn, his usual calm replaced by concern. They've been calling my office nonstop, he said, setting his briefcase down. Threats, voicemails, you name it. But the detectives' team has already traced Daniel's messages. They're building a separate case. I rubbed my temples. I thought the restraining order. He cut me off gently. Restraining orders only work on people who respect boundaries. Men like him need consequences, not paper. Then what happens now? He opened his briefcase and pulled out a file. Now, we reinforce everything. New locks. New security. And we fast-track the property sale closure, so they have nothing left to cling to. I nodded slowly. Also, he added, his tone softening, I spoke with Detective Owens. They've issued a warrant for Daniel's arrest on charges of financial fraud and harassment. Once he's caught, this ends. The words once he's caught didn't comfort me the way they should have. After he left, I walked to the window again. The city looked so alive, so unaware of my small, unfolding storm. Down on the street, a car slowed in front of my building. Black sedan. Same tinted windows. It idled for a moment, then rolled away again. My pulse quickened. I stepped back from the glass. Maybe it was paranoia. Maybe it was him. Either way, I knew I wasn't safe yet. That evening, as dusk bled into the city, I received another message, this time from Amelia. I didn't know he'd go this far. He's losing control, Lena. Please believe me. He blames you for everything. I hesitated before replying. Then tell me where he is. She didn't answer right away. 10 minutes later, another text came. He's staying at Dad's. But he said he'd make a statement soon. I think he's coming for you. The chill that went through me wasn't just fear, it was understanding. My father had become Daniel's refuge, his last ally. The man who had raised me was now harboring the man who tried to destroy me. For a long time, I stared at the candle on my table, the same one I'd lit for my grandmother. Its flame flickered weakly, then steadied again. Power is patience. I whispered the words like a prayer. If they wanted a war, they'd find out what it looked like when a quiet woman finally stopped holding back. At 3:27 a.m., I woke to the faint sound of glass shattering. I froze. The living room window. Then, a single voice, low, male, and close. You should have stayed quiet, Elena. The sound of glass breaking wasn't loud. It was sharp, surgical, a single shatter followed by the faint crunch of someone stepping carefully inside. Every muscle in my body went rigid. I didn't move. I barely breathed. My phone lay on the nightstand, face down. I reached for it slowly, silently, fingers trembling. One slip, one sound, and whoever was in my living room would know I was awake. The faint glow from the streetlight spilled through the crack under my bedroom door. Shadows moved in it. Slow. Deliberate. You should have stayed quiet, Elena. The voice froze my blood. Daniel. I pressed my thumb to my phone, opened the screen, and texted David, he's here. Then I dropped the phone onto the bed and crawled toward the far side, away from the door. I didn't dare speak. A floorboard creaked outside. Then another. I grabbed the small metal flashlight from my nightstand, not as a weapon, but something, anything. My pulse roared in my ears, drowning out everything else. He was whispering now, almost conversational. You think the law can protect you? You think you can humiliate people like me and walk away? Another step closer. I could smell the faint trace of cologne, the one I'd smelled in that envelope with the necklace. I edged toward the window. If I could get it open quietly enough. A sudden crash made me jump. My living room lamp hit the floor, followed by the sound of drawers being pulled open. He was searching. For what? Then I realized, the files. He was looking for evidence. I took a slow breath, forced myself to think. The USB backups were in my bag by the couch. The originals were at David's office. He wouldn't find anything useful, but he didn't know that. I crouched beside the bed, heart pounding so loud it hurt. My phone vibrated, a soft hum against the sheets. I risked a glance. David. Cops are on the way. Don't engage. Stay quiet. Stay hidden. Another crash. Then silence. For a long moment, I heard nothing. Just my own heartbeat. Then, footsteps again, heavier this time. Closer. The door handle turned. I gripped the flashlight tighter, my knuckles white. The door creaked open an inch, 2 inches, just enough for a shadow to fall across the floor. And then, sirens. Distant at first, then louder. Daniel's voice turned sharp. "You called them?" He slammed the door open. I screamed, more out of instinct than courage, and swung the flashlight. It hit his arm hard enough to make him curse. He staggered back, and I bolted. Past him, through the hallway, barefoot on broken glass. He lunged, grabbing my wrist, yanking me back. "You ruined everything." I twisted, pain shooting through my arm. "Get off me." Blue and red lights flooded through the windows, flashing across the walls. The sirens were deafening now. Daniel turned toward the sound, hesitated for half a second, then bolted for the kitchen. I ran the opposite way, out the door, into the hallway where 2 officers were already storming up the stairs. "He's inside," I shouted, pointing. "He's got a weapon." I didn't know if he did, but in that moment, I didn't care. The officers pushed past me. I stumbled down the corridor, clutching my bleeding hand. The smell of rain from the open window mixed with sweat and fear. From inside, I heard shouting. A crash. Then silence. Minutes later, they let him out in handcuffs. His shirt was torn, his face pale with fury. He locked eyes with me as they pushed him past. "You think this ends with me?" he hissed. "You don't even know what he's done." I froze. "Who?" He smirked. "Your father." Then they shoved him into the elevator, and he was gone. I stood there, shaking, surrounded by flashing lights and shattered glass. One of the officers offered me a blanket. "You're safe now," he said. Safe. The word felt foreign. Detective Owens arrived minutes later, trench coat damp from the rain. "He's in custody," he said. "We caught him trying to break your security camera before entering." "You did good, Elena." I swallowed hard. He said something before they took him. "About my father." Owen's eyes darkened. "We already suspected as much. We found communication logs between them. Your father's been transferring money to an offshore account linked to Daniel for months." I blinked. "Why?" "Looks like he was trying to hide assets from the restitution order," Owens said grimly. "And paying Daniel to handle you." My stomach turned. "Handle me?" Owens met my gaze. "We'll find out what that meant. But for now, he's been warned. The restraining order extends to all of them." He looked around the apartment, at the broken window, the glass scattered across the floor. "You need to stay somewhere else tonight. Somewhere safe." I nodded numbly. "I'll call David." When everyone left, the silence that followed was almost unbearable. The apartment looked like a war zone, papers scattered, drawers overturned, the window taped over by police. In the center of the room, on the table, sat the candle I'd lit for my grandmother. The flame was still burning, steady and defiant. I stared at it for a long time. They'd taken everything they could: money, family, peace, safety. But this tiny flame, this stubborn light, had survived them all. I stayed at a hotel that night. David came by after midnight with extra security paperwork. He looked exhausted. "I'm sorry," I said. "You shouldn't have to." He shook his head. "Don't apologize for surviving. Ever." He handed me a new folder. "Owen sent this over before I came. You'll want to see it in the morning." I looked at the label: confidential, financial disclosures, Ramirez estate. "What is it?" David exhaled slowly. "Evidence that your father might have been hiding something bigger than we thought. If what's inside is true, the inheritance you know about isn't the whole story." I frowned. "There's more?" He nodded. "A lot more." After he left, I lay in the dark hotel room, the folder resting on the nightstand beside me. I didn't open it yet. I just stared at the ceiling, the hum of the city outside a strange comfort. Daniel was gone. My father was cornered. The storm was quiet again, but only for now. At dawn, I finally opened the folder. The first page was a trust amendment, dated 2 months before my grandmother died. And in her handwriting, should Elena ever be in danger, the controlling interest of the Ramirez family company transfers fully to her. Attached was a note. Hidden beneath the lies, you are the heir to everything. The words blurred at first, not because I couldn't read them, but because my mind refused to accept what they meant. Should Elena ever be in danger, the controlling interest of the Ramirez family company transfers fully to her. I read it again. And again. Every repetition hit harder. It wasn't just money. It wasn't just a house. It was the company. The same company my father had built his ego on, the same one he'd always said I'd never understand. The same one he used to control everyone, my mother, my sister, the employees who feared him. It was mine now. I flipped to the next page. A notarized statement, signed by the family attorney my grandmother had used decades ago. Date of activation, upon confirmation of verified threat against the beneficiary, Elena Ramirez. My hand flew to my mouth. The break-in. The harassment. The police reports. All of it had triggered the clause. She had built her protection into the very structure of his empire. My grandmother hadn't just foreseen betrayal, she'd engineered justice. I called David immediately. He answered groggily. David, it's not just inheritance, I said. She left me the company. There was a beat of silence. What? It's in the amendment. The clause activates if I'm ever in danger. Owen's report confirms that last night qualifies. He was quiet for a moment, then said, that means you're now the majority shareholder. I laughed, a raw, disbelieving sound. I own the business he's been running his entire life. David exhaled slowly. Then it's time to decide how to use it. Because he's not going to take that quietly. I don't care if he screams, I said. I'm done being afraid of his voice. By noon, we were at the corporate office downtown, the building I'd grown up walking past but had never been invited inside. The glass tower looked colder now, smaller, less like power and more like a relic of his control. The receptionist blinked when she saw me walk in with David. I'm here to see Mr. Ramirez, I said. I'm sorry, he's in a board meeting. He's in my board meeting, I corrected gently, sliding the signed document across the counter. Effective as of this morning. Her eyes widened as she scanned the paper, then quickly picked up the phone. Within minutes, a security officer escorted us upstairs. When the elevator doors opened, I saw them, my father at the head of the long conference table, surrounded by executives. My mother sat near him, pale and tight-lipped. My sister was nowhere in sight. He looked up when he saw me. The color drained from his face, then returned as fury. What are you doing here? I placed the folder on the table. Taking what's mine. The boardroom fell silent. David spoke first. Effective today, under the conditions of Isabel Ramirez's trust amendment, Ms. Elena Ramirez is now the controlling shareholder and CEO of Ramirez Holdings. A murmur rippled through the room. My father stood, his fists clenched. That's impossible. She's lying. David calmly slid the documents toward him. All verified. Legally binding. Notarized. Triggered by last night's confirmed criminal threat. My father's eyes flicked up to mine. You set this up. I smiled faintly. No. She did. His face twisted. You think you can walk in here and take everything I built? I leaned forward, voice low but steady. I'm not taking anything. You built this company with her money, her trust, and her patience. You just forgot whose name was on the foundation. He slammed his palm on the table. You're out of your mind. David remained calm. Actually, sir, you're out of power. Legally. The executives exchanged nervous glances. One of them, an older man with kind eyes, cleared his throat. "Mr. Ramirez, the paperwork's valid. It's done." My father looked at me as if seeing me for the first time, not the quiet daughter, not the scapegoat, but the end of his illusion. "You're making a mistake, Elena," he said. His voice cracked. "You think power will save you? It destroys people." I held his gaze. "It only destroys those who think they own it." The meeting ended with signatures and silence. By the time I stepped out of the building, the air felt electric, not from triumph, but from release. The chain that had tethered me to their cruelty had finally snapped. David walked beside me. "Congratulations, CEO." I laughed softly. "That word feels strange." "It'll fit soon enough." We reached the car. Before getting in, I turned back to look at the tower one last time. My father stood at the window on the top floor, watching. His silhouette was still, a man realizing that everything he'd built to cage others had become his own prison. I almost pitied him. Almost. That evening, I drove to my grandmother's house, now mine, too. The lights were warm through the windows, the scent of old wood filling the air as I stepped inside. The necklace the police had taken for evidence now rested on the mantelpiece. Cleaned. Restored. Returned. I picked it up carefully, feeling its familiar weight against my palm. For the first time, it didn't feel like grief. It felt like lineage. On the table, her candle waited. I lit it again, the flame rising steady and sure. "Your storm worked," I whispered. "Every seed you planted grew roots." Outside, thunder rumbled again, not loud, not violent, just a soft echo in the distance. For years, I thought silence was surrender. But tonight, in the quiet hum of that house, I realized it was something else entirely. It was strategy. It was inheritance. And now, it was victory. The next morning, David called with a final update. "They froze your father's accounts. The restitution payments are in process. He's out of the company for good." I closed my eyes, letting the words sink in. "It's over, then." "For them, yes," he said. "For you, it's just beginning." That afternoon, an email arrived from an unknown address. Subject line, "She knew you'd find this." Inside was a scanned handwritten letter, my grandmother's final one, dated a week before her death. "When you hold everything they tried to take, remember, forgiveness isn't for them, it's for you. But wait before you decide, because one truth still hides beneath their lies." I stared at the email for a full minute before opening it. Subject, "She knew you'd find this." No sender name, no signature, just a string of numbers. The attachment pulsed faintly in the glow of the screen, a scanned letter in my grandmother's unmistakable handwriting. I clicked. Her words unfolded across the page in blue ink, each line curved with deliberate grace. "My dearest Elena. If you are reading this, then the storm has passed, and you are standing in the quiet. I prayed you would find that quiet, not as surrender, but as strength." I swallowed hard. The letters blurred for a moment before refocusing. "There is one truth I never spoke, not even to your father. The company I left you, it is not built solely on his work. Long ago, before your parents met, I invested in a venture under another name. That venture became the true source of this family's wealth." My breath caught. "Your father never knew, though he thought he did. He built his empire atop my foundation. The controlling shares you now hold include that original company, one that has continued quietly, under the name Aria Holdings." The name sparked something distant in my memory. I'd seen it once, on a small document buried in the trust folder, brushed past without attention. I kept reading. "There is an account number written beneath this page. It leads to everything I could not explain while I was alive. But before you open it, remember this, power is not inheritance. It is choice. Do not let the same hunger that consumed them touch you." She ended the letter the way she always did, with her simple sign-off. "Love always finds its way home. Isabel." I sat back, staring at the screen, my pulse hammering. Aria Holdings. I pulled up my laptop and began searching. The results were startling. A private investment company with assets in real estate, logistics, and renewable energy. Valuation, nearly $400 million. And listed under silent beneficiaries, I. Ramirez, deceased, and E. Ramirez, controlling interest pending. The air left my lungs. She hadn't just saved me. She'd rebuilt me in secret, brick by brick, dollar by dollar, beneath their arrogance. And now it was mine. I called David immediately. He picked up on the second ring, still sounding half asleep. David, I said, my voice shaking, I think my grandmother owned another company. A huge one. Aria Holdings. Silence. Then a sharp inhale. Wait, what? I found a letter. She said my father didn't know. The assets roll into my inheritance automatically. Send me everything, he said quickly. I forwarded the email, my hands trembling. Within minutes, he called back. Elena, this changes everything, he said. Aria Holdings is massive. If these documents are authentic, you now control more wealth than your father ever did. I leaned back, trying to steady my breath. She built all of this while they were too busy fighting each other. Exactly, David said. She hid her strength the same way you did, in silence. The next morning, we met at his office. He'd already printed everything, organized it into a new folder labeled Aria Transfer, Private Holdings. I had a contact at the registry verify it, David said, sliding the papers across the desk. It's real. She registered the company 38 years ago under a pseudonym. You've been the listed successor for the past decade. I blinked. She must have updated it after she saw what they were doing to me. She didn't just protect you, David said. She prepared you to rule. His words hit me like thunder, not arrogance, not flattery, but truth. For years, I had lived small because they told me small was safe. But she had always seen more. Later that day, I drove back to the house one last time. It stood empty now, quiet, the sold sign half faded from rain. The air smelled of dust and endings. I walked through each room slowly, the living room where they'd laughed at my expense, the kitchen where my mother used guilt as seasoning, the stairs where I used to pause, wondering if they'd ever notice I was there. I stopped at my old bedroom door. Inside, sunlight cut across the floor in golden stripes. I stood in the middle of the room and whispered, "You don't get to haunt me anymore." Then I turned off the lights and closed the door for the last time. Outside, David waited by the car. He smiled when he saw me. Ready? For what? To stop surviving, he said. And start living. I nodded. Let's go. That night, back in my apartment, I opened the file from Aria Holdings again. Each line felt like a heartbeat, bank accounts, subsidiaries, charitable trusts in my grandmother's name. And at the bottom, a single note she had written in the margin years ago. One day, when she's ready, she'll understand that silence was never weakness. It was preparation. The tears came this time, quiet, steady, cleansing. Everything they tried to take had found its way back to me, multiplied through time, patience, and design. My grandmother had left me more than wealth. She'd left me proof that legacy wasn't blood, it was intention. I walked to the window, the city lights sprawling beneath me like a living constellation. My reflection stared back, calm, unrecognizable. I wasn't the girl they'd thrown out, or the woman they'd tried to erase. I was what survived after the storm burned everything false away. I whispered into the glass, "You did it, Grandma. You built a world where I could finally breathe." Behind me, the candle flickered, the same one I'd lit the night the will was read, the night the truth began. Its flame burned higher, brighter. The next morning, David texted. "Press is catching wind of your case. You'll need to make a statement soon." I stared at the message for a long time, then typed back. "Not yet. I want them to talk before I speak." Because that was the lesson she'd left me: let them talk. Let the noise eat itself. Then, when the world quiets, speak once, clearly, and end the story. That evening, as I prepared for bed, another email arrived, same unknown address. Subject: You're not the only one she protected. Inside was a photo of my grandmother with a young woman I didn't recognize, and beneath it, a line in my grandmother's handwriting. Tell her the truth about the second heir. The photo felt like a ghost crawling out of the screen. My grandmother sat at her garden table, the one with chipped porcelain edges and wild jasmine creeping through the lattice. Her smile was soft, familiar, and beside her was a girl about my age, maybe a little younger, her hand resting on my grandmother's arm like she belonged there. At the bottom, my grandmother's neat handwriting curved across the margin. Tell her the truth about the second heir. I zoomed in. The girl had dark hair, sharp eyes, and something else, something familiar. Her smile. My grandmother's smile. A second heir. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My mind flooded with questions. Who was she? Where had she come from? Why had my grandmother never said anything? I called David immediately. He picked up before the first ring even finished. David, there's another heir, I said. My grandmother mentioned her in a letter, or a message, whatever this is. He exhaled sharply. Another heir? That's impossible. You're the sole beneficiary. That's what I thought. I sent him the photo. He went quiet for a long moment. That handwriting looks authentic. It is, I whispered. I'd recognize it anywhere. Do you know who the woman is? No. But the message said tell her the truth. Maybe she doesn't know either. David sighed. We'll have to find her. If she exists, and if she's legally tied to your grandmother's estate, she could be entitled to part of the inheritance. I closed my eyes. Then we find her. I don't want another secret left to rot. By the next morning, David had already tracked down a lead. The girl's face, when run through a few databases, matched a woman named Clara Mendoza, age 31, born 2 years after my sister. She's registered under your grandmother's old address, David said. And get this, her mother's maiden name is Ramirez. I felt the air leave my lungs. She's family? He nodded grimly. Looks like it. Maybe an illegitimate child, your father's sister's daughter, or my father's, I whispered. David didn't answer, but the silence said enough. I sank into my chair, my mind spinning. My father, the man who preached morality, who weaponized reputation, might have hidden a child for 3 decades while pretending to be the victim of everyone else's sin. It made sense now, the tone of my grandmother's letters, her guilt, her protectiveness. She hadn't just been shielding me from my parents' greed. She'd been shielding someone else too. Find her, I said. Please. It didn't take long. That afternoon, David called again. She agreed to meet, he said. She knows your grandmother, or at least she did. She thought Isabel was just a family friend who helped her and her mother financially. Where? I asked. The old church cafe on Rivera Street. Tomorrow morning. I hesitated, my heart thudding. David, what if she doesn't know who she really is? Then you tell her, he said gently. Just like your grandmother asked. The cafe smelled like warm bread and nostalgia. When I walked in, Clara was already there, sitting by the window, stirring her coffee nervously. She stood when she saw me, eyes wide with recognition. You're Elena. It wasn't a question. I nodded. You knew her? She smiled, small and sad. I used to visit when I was little. My mom said Isabel was family, somehow. She'd bake cookies with me, read to me. She always called me mi pequeña luz. My little light. That phrase hit me like lightning. My grandmother had called me the same thing. Clara, I said softly, did she ever tell you who your father was? She shook her head. No. My mom wouldn't talk about him. She said it would ruin everything. I took a deep breath and slid the printed letter across the table. I think she was trying to protect you. She read it silently, her lips trembling as she reached the final line. When she looked up, her eyes were wet. My grandmother? Yes, I said. Ours. She pressed her hands over her mouth. Then that means, we're sisters, I said. Half-sisters, probably. She must have known and wanted us to find each other after everything ended. Clara shook her head, tears falling freely now. All this time, I thought I didn't belong anywhere. My mom died when I was 18. Isabel used to send money for college, letters, little notes, but after she passed, it all stopped. I thought it was charity. I reached across the table, covering her shaking hand with mine. It wasn't charity. It was love. She laughed through her tears. She always said you were brave. That someday you'd do what she couldn't. I felt a lump rise in my throat. She said that? Clara nodded. She said you'd free us all. We talked for hours, about childhoods lived on opposite sides of truth, about my grandmother's secret visits, about the way silence had been our family's only language. When I told her about the trial, about the company, about the inheritance, she listened with quiet disbelief. She built a fortress for you, Clara said softly. And she left a key for me. I smiled. Maybe she wanted us to rebuild it together, but not as a prison this time. As something better. Clara nodded. She used to tell me the same thing every time we said goodbye, the storm always ends, Mija. Maybe this is what she meant. That night, I stood on my balcony with the city lights stretching endlessly below me. For the first time, I didn't feel alone. Somewhere out there, another piece of my grandmother's heart had been beating quietly, waiting for me to find it. David called again before midnight. We'll have to update the legal documents, he said. But I have to tell you, this doesn't diminish what's yours. You still control the company, the estate, the assets. Your grandmother made sure of that. If anything, she just made her circle of protection bigger. I smiled faintly. She was always 3 steps ahead. He chuckled. Sounds like someone else I know. When we hung up, I looked up at the stars, pale and flickering through the city haze, and whispered, "Thank you, Grandma. For every hidden truth. For every second chance." The next morning, I woke to a new message from Clara. I found something. A letter from Isabel, postmarked the same week she died. It mentions a vault. She said it holds the recordings. All of them. The proof of what your father did. Attached was a photo of an old brass key engraved with a single word, Aria. The photo of the brass key made my pulse quicken. Its head was engraved with one simple word, Aria. The same name as my grandmother's hidden company. The same name she'd woven into every secret. Clara's message echoed in my mind. It mentions a vault. She said it holds the recordings. All of them. The proof of what your father did. Recordings. My throat tightened. My grandmother had always been meticulous, documenting everything, finances, letters, even voice memos she'd left in boxes of old cassettes. But if she'd hidden recordings that proved what my father had done, then everything wasn't finished after all. I called Clara immediately. She answered on the second ring, her voice trembling. I didn't want to text too much in case someone's monitoring us, she said quickly. The letter was buried in one of her books. Jane Eyre. Page 214. Where's the vault? I asked. She hesitated. The note says it's inside one of her old properties. The small coastal villa in Miramar. It's been abandoned for years. I froze. I knew that house, a low, white structure tucked between cliffs and sea. I'd visited it once as a child. My grandmother had called it her quiet house, where she went when the city became too loud. She left the key with you, I said slowly. She must have known you'd find me, Clara said softly. Maybe she wanted us to open it together. By dawn, we were on the road. The highway stretched along the coastline, the ocean silver under a bruised sky. Clara drove, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. I watched the horizon, the waves crashing against rocks below. Neither of us spoke much. We didn't need to. The air between us was heavy with something deeper than words, anticipation, fear, truth humming just out of reach. After 3 hours, the villa appeared, smaller than I remembered, its walls cracked with age, the gate rusted half open. Wild vines climbed the stone pillars. The ocean's roar filled the air. "This is it," Clara whispered. We stepped inside. Dust motes drifted through beams of light. The air smelled of salt and memory. Everything looked untouched, as if my grandmother had walked out one day and never come back. I ran my fingers along the piano in the corner, its keys yellowed and warped. My grandmother used to play when she thought no one was listening. Aria, she'd called her favorite piece. "The key," I said. Clara handed it to me. The metal was cold, heavy, almost humming in my palm. We searched the house, room by room, wall by wall, until Clara called out, "Elena, come here." She stood in the study, pointing at the far wall. The baseboard looked newer than the rest, the wood smoother, less faded. I knelt and ran my hand along it. One panel moved slightly under pressure. A hidden compartment. My heart raced. I slid the key into the small brass slot I hadn't noticed before. It fit perfectly. When I turned it, something clicked deep inside the wall. The panel loosened, revealing a small metal door behind it. I opened it carefully. Inside, wrapped in linen, were 3 old cassette tapes and a handwritten note. Clara leaned in. "Read it." I unfolded the paper. "If you found this, then truth has waited long enough. These recordings document the events that destroyed what we once called family. They are not vengeance, they are memory. The first is mine. The second is his. The third is yours to decide what to do with." My throat closed. 3 tapes. One for her. One for my father. One for me. Clara reached for the box. "There's an old cassette player over there," she whispered. We set it on the desk, wiped off the dust, and inserted the first tape. The sound cracked, then my grandmother's voice filled the room, soft, steady, heartbreaking. "If you're hearing this, then I am gone. I left these words because silence cannot live forever. When your father was young, I built this company for him. But power changes people. When he found out about Clara, he used the trust to control her mother. To control me. To hide his shame. I could not forgive that. I could not let it continue." Clara's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God." I pressed play again. He forged documents. He redirected assets. And when I confronted him, he threatened to destroy everything I built, including you, Elena. So I hid the truth. I split the inheritance. I chose silence, because the law wasn't ready then. But one day, it would be. Her voice trembled slightly, then steadied again. "I know this will fall to you. You, my quiet one. You, who sees without shouting. When the time comes, you will hold proof of who he truly is. And you will decide what legacy remains." I stopped the tape. The room was silent except for the distant crash of waves. Clara whispered, "She recorded everything." I nodded slowly. "And she wanted us to decide whether to reveal it." I picked up the second tape. The label read, "Miguel, Confession." My hands trembled as I placed it into the player. Static. Then a voice I knew too well. My father's. But not the booming, controlling voice I remembered. This one was shaky, almost pleading. "If you're listening to this, I must be gone. Isabel made me do this, said it was the only way to keep the peace. I did what I had to. For the company. For my name. I didn't mean for anyone to get hurt." He paused. A long exhale. Clara wasn't supposed to exist. I tried to fix that. I paid her mother to disappear. Isabel found out. She said she'd tell Elena one day. I couldn't let that happen. Clara covered her mouth, a soft sob breaking the silence. My pulse pounded. My father, the man who'd called me ungrateful, cold, heartless, had committed every sin he'd accused me of. The tape clicked off. We sat there, unmoving, the weight of every lie pressing down. Finally, Clara whispered, "What's on the third tape?" I looked down. The label read only one word, choice. I turned it over in my hand. I think she meant it for us. We didn't play it. Not yet. We sat there instead, side by side, the waves crashing against the cliffs outside. Clara finally spoke. "What will you do with the recordings?" I stared at the flickering light through the cracked blinds. "I'll let the truth breathe. But not as revenge. As release." She nodded. "Then maybe she'll finally rest." As we stood to leave, the phone in my pocket buzzed, an unknown number again. A single text message appeared. "If you release those tapes, you'll regret it. Some truths bury themselves for a reason." It was signed, Mur. The message from the unknown number burned on my screen like a threat carved into glass. "If you release those tapes, you'll regret it. Some truths bury themselves for a reason. Mur." My father. Clara stood beside me in the fading light of the villa, her hand gripping my arm. "He knows," she whispered. I nodded slowly, the key still cold in my palm. "Then he knows he's already lost." We didn't leave Miramar that night. We couldn't. It felt as if the house itself wanted us to stay until the truth was done breathing. The waves crashed below the cliffs like applause that had waited too long. I set the tapes in front of me on the table, lined in a row. The first two were open secrets now. The third one, choice, waited like an unanswered prayer. Clara sat across from me, her face pale but determined. "You don't have to share them publicly," she said softly. "You already won." I met her eyes. Winning was survival. "This is justice." She exhaled. "Then we do it together." At dawn, we drove back to the city. The sky was bruised pink, and the highway shimmered with early light. David met us at his office before it opened. When I placed the tapes on his desk, he looked from me to Clara, confusion flickering across his face. "Long story," I said quietly. "She's family." David blinked. "Another heir?" "Another survivor," Clara said. I explained everything, the villa, the vault, the tapes, the confession. David listened in silence, his expression darkening as I spoke. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "If these tapes are what you say they are, they'll end him. Legally, publicly, permanently." "That's the point," I said. He hesitated. "Elena, once this is out, there's no turning back. The name Ramirez will never mean what it did before." I gave a small, tired smile. "Good. It's time it meant something honest." By noon, we'd digitized the recordings. David arranged a press contact, a journalist known for handling corporate scandals with care and precision. Clara and I sat together while the files uploaded, the progress bar crawling across the screen like time itself. When it hit 100%, I whispered, "It's done." Within an hour, the story broke. Headline: Exclusive, Ramirez patriarch accused of fraud, extortion, and concealment, confession recordings surface. The article included excerpts from the tapes, my grandmother's calm confession, my father's trembling justification, my own verification. The media storm was instant. News vans gathered outside the company headquarters. Former executives released statements of shock and betrayal. Old family friends pretended they'd always known something was wrong. David's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Clara watched it all unfold on the television in his office, her eyes wide. "It's like watching history rewrite itself," she said quietly. I stood by the window, watching the city buzz below. No, I said. It's like watching silence finally speak. That evening, my father called. Private number. I let it ring 3 times before answering. His voice was raw, almost hoarse. You think this is justice? I think it's the truth, I said evenly. You ruined me, he hissed. You ruined this family. You ruined it yourself, I replied. I just stopped protecting your lies. There was a long pause, then a sound that almost resembled laughter. You sound just like her. Isabel. Always pretending purity while she played God. She didn't play God, I said. She just stopped bowing to one. He exhaled sharply. You'll regret this. You'll see what happens when you take away a man's name. Then the line went dead. By the next morning, the consequences had begun. The company's board issued a statement confirming my control. Shares plummeted temporarily, then began to recover as investors realized I wasn't my father. The authorities launched an official investigation into financial misconduct, coercion, and threats. David forwarded me the email from the prosecutor's office. Due to the provided evidence, an arrest warrant for Miguel Ramirez is in process. When I read it, I didn't feel triumph. Just release. Clara came over that night with takeout and cheap wine. We sat on my living room floor, surrounded by stacks of unopened letters and documents, laughing at the absurdity of it all. He's probably losing his mind right now, she said between bites. I smiled faintly. He already lost it when control stopped working. She looked at me then, really looked. You know, you could have buried those tapes. You could have kept everything quiet. No one would have blamed you. I know. Then why didn't you? I thought about it for a moment. Because silence protects the wrong people. And she didn't raise me to protect monsters. Clara nodded slowly. Then she'd be proud of you. For the first time, I believed that. The following week, the world calmed. My father surrendered quietly, escorted into custody while reporters shouted his name. My mother moved out of the estate without a word. My sister vanished from social media. But the noise no longer reached me. One afternoon, Clara and I drove back to Miramar. We walked down to the cliffs where the sea crashed endlessly below. The sky was white and gold, the air filled with salt and memory. We buried copies of the tapes beneath the old fig tree near the villa, marking the spot with a single stone. This is where the lies end, I said. Clara placed her hand over the earth. And where the truth rests. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of jasmine. That night, I lit the candle again. The flame flickered, steady, alive. Everything had fallen, the company, the mask, the illusion of family. And yet, somehow, I felt lighter. Not victorious. Just free. I whispered into the quiet, you were right, Grandma. The storm always ends. Then I closed my eyes and finally slept without fear. The next morning, David called with one last message. They found something in your father's storage unit, he said. Another box labeled Aria, marked confidential. It's addressed to you. The box arrived the next day, plain, weathered cardboard, sealed with brittle tape. My name was scrawled across it in my father's handwriting, for Elena. For a long time, I couldn't touch it. It sat on my table like a wound I wasn't ready to reopen. Clara hovered near the kitchen, silent, watching me. You don't have to, she said softly. But I did. Not because I wanted closure, but because I wanted to understand the kind of man who could build an empire out of guilt and fear, and still think he loved us. I cut through the tape. Dust lifted like ghosts. Inside were documents, bank statements, letters, old photographs, and one final envelope, sealed in wax. My name again. I broke it open with shaking hands. Elena. If you're reading this, I've already lost everything. Maybe that's fair. Maybe it's what I deserve. I swallowed hard. I wasn't always this man. Your grandmother saw something in me once. So did your mother. But power is an addiction that feels like protection until it devours you. I didn't know how to love without owning, and I didn't know how to let go without destroying. His words were clumsy, but they cut deeper than any insult he'd ever thrown at me. When I found out about Clara, I thought silence would erase the mistake. I thought I could bury the truth like I buried everything that made me human. But Isabel outplayed me. She always did. She left you with her strength and left me with my reflection, and that was my punishment. I blinked back tears I hadn't expected. I don't ask for forgiveness. Just remember, sometimes, the ones who teach you fear are the ones who feared you first. Miguel. I folded the letter carefully, placed it back into the box, and closed the lid. There was nothing left to say. That evening, Clara and I drove back to Miramar one last time. The ocean was calm, the sky bruised with sunset. The house looked smaller than before, like it, too, had exhaled. We carried the box inside. The air smelled of salt and jasmine, the scent that always meant home to my grandmother. In the study, the candle still sat where I'd left it. I lit it again, watching the flame catch and hold steady. "This is where it ends," I said quietly. Clara nodded. "And where it begins again." We opened the window, letting the wind move through the room. Papers rustled softly, old ghosts stretching their limbs. Then, together, we placed the box in the old fireplace. I struck a match, and the flames rose. The paper curled, blackened, and dissolved. His words, his secrets, his empire of control, all of it turned to ash. For a moment, the firelight flickered across the walls like memory trying to hold on. Then it, too, went quiet. Afterward, we sat outside on the cliff's edge. The sea below shimmered under the moonlight. Clara leaned her head on my shoulder. "Do you ever wonder what she'd say if she saw all this?" I smiled faintly. "She'd say it was about time." We laughed softly, not from joy, but from release. The wind carried the smell of the ocean, and for the first time it didn't sting. It just moved. A week later, the company reopened under its new name, Aria Foundation. Not a corporation, not a dynasty, a trust dedicated to education, to rebuilding what greed had broken. Clara handled the community programs. David oversaw the legal transitions. And me, I learned to stop looking backward. When the press asked why I changed everything, I said the only thing that felt true. Because inheritance isn't what we're given. It's what we refuse to repeat. One evening, months later, I stood again in the house where it had all begun. The estate was empty now, quiet and clean. The mirrors had been replaced, the walls repainted, the ghosts finally evicted. In the study, I placed my grandmother's necklace on the mantelpiece and lit the candle beside it. The flame caught easily, burning tall. "I did it," I whispered. I kept the promise. The air seemed to warm, the candlelight flickering as though it breathed with me. And for a fleeting moment, I could swear I heard her voice, soft, proud, familiar. "You were never the broken one, Elena. You were just the one who stopped pretending the cracks were beautiful." I smiled. For once, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. The ocean hummed in the distance, steady and eternal. I stepped outside, barefoot on the cool grass, the moonlight spilling over everything the way forgiveness does, quietly, without demand. Behind me, the candle burned in the window like a small, unwavering heart. This time, I didn't walk away from the light. I walked toward it. They thought they buried me under silence, but all they did was plant me deeper. I grew in their absence. I bloomed in their disbelief. And when I finally rose, I didn't come for revenge, I came for balance. My grandmother once told me that real power doesn't roar. It whispers. It watches. It waits. Now, every breath I take is hers. Every truth I speak is ours. If you've ever been silenced, betrayed, erased, remember this. There's no greater revenge than peace that can't be taken away. Tell me. If the ones who hurt you saw your calm now, would they call it weakness, or would they finally recognize it as the sound of their power dying?